Hello everyone, thank you for clicking on this video. Not in the ephemeral glow of screens, but before the anticipated, elemental radiance of a fire, yet to be fully mastered, a fire that will soon serve as the heart of creation. We invite you to step further than before, deeper into the sinews of a past age, the 13th century, an era where the sweat of a man's brow, the strength of his arm, and the keen practiced judgment of his eye were the currency of survival and the bedrock of community. You are to become, for this extended sojourn, the village blacksmith, not a hero of song and legend, but a figure of indispensable skill and quiet authority, whose rhythmic hammer blows upon hot iron were as integral to the pulse of medieval life as the changing seasons or the peal of the church bell. For this considerable length of time, the identity you hold in your world must recede. Your name is now likely a common one, perhaps Hugh, or Walter, Richard, or Gilbert, a name spoken with a mixture of respect for your vital craft and the everyday familiarity afforded to a neighbour. Your waking thoughts are not of abstract concerns, but of the tangible, the consistency of the charcoal, the precise shimmering colour of heated steel, the satisfying ring of a sound weld, the anxieties of a dwindling iron supply. Your universe is largely contained within the smoky, resonant confines of your workshop, the smithy, yet the products of your labour travel far, touching every aspect of village existence. The air you will breathe is a rich tapestry of burning fuel, incandescent metal, and honest perspiration. The sounds that surround you are the elemental symphony of the forge, the deep sigh and roar of the bellows, the sharp, decisive hiss of quenching steam, the authoritative clang of hammer meeting anvil. You are this blacksmith, and the intricate, demanding, and deeply textured fabric of your life is about to unfold with unprecedented detail. Your day invariably begins in the profound stillness of pre-dawn, an awakening governed not by external summons, but by an internal clock, meticulously calibrated by years of unwavering routine and the relentless demands of your profession. The darkness within your modest dwelling, perhaps a sturdy timber-framed cottage, its walls a mix of wattle and daub or rough-hewn planks, its thatched roof a dense tapestry of straw or reed, often directly adjoining or standing mere paces from the smithy itself, is thick and cool. As you stir and rise from your straw-filled pallet, or a simple bedstead strung with ropes and topped with a coarse woolen blanket, your body, a well-used instrument, greets you with a familiar chorus of muted aches and stiffness. These are not the laments of abject suffering, but the honest acknowledgements of muscles and joints that have known true, sustained labour, the quiet price of your powerful craft. You navigate the familiar confines of your home with an instinctive grace, your bare feet or simple leather-soled shoes, finding their way across the packed earth or uneven wooden floorboards without need for light. The air within might carry the faint, residual aroma of last night's simple but nourishing meal, a thick pottage of grains and root vegetables perhaps, or the ever-present comforting scent of wood smoke from your own small hearth, where embers might still be coaxed back to life under a protective blanket of grey ash. The ritual of preparing for the day is stripped of all superfluity. Water, drawn the previous evening from the village well or a nearby clear stream, and stored in an earthenware pitcher, is cold and sharp against your skin as you wash your face and hands, a bracing shock that banishes the last tendrils of sleep. You dress in practical, durable garments, a loose-fitting shirt of coarse, unbleached linen or sturdy wool, practical breeches or hose that allow for ease of movement, and robust leather shoes, perhaps with wooden soles or heavy clogs, designed to offer some protection from the hazards of your workshop. Finally, you don the indispensable leather apron, your primary shield against the forge's fierce heat and the shower of incandescent sparks. It is a garment of considerable substance, stiffened in places by age and repeated exposure to heat, softened in others by wear and the natural oils of your skin, its surface a rich patina of soot, scale, ingrained grime, and the faint metallic scent of countless encounters with fire and iron. It is less an item of clothing and more a symbol of your identity, a craftsman's well-worn regalia. Stepping out from the comparative quiet of your dwelling into the nascent day, the world outside is cool and often damp with dew, the air carrying the clean scent of wet earth and vegetation. perhaps the distant, muffled sounds of the awakening village, the first lowing of a cow from a nearby byre, the sharp crow of a distant rooster heralding the reluctant dawn, the rustle of wind through the trees that might fringe the village. Your path to the smithy is short, a track worn smooth by your own countless passages. The workshop itself, a robust structure of timber, perhaps with lower walls of rough fieldstone for stability and fire resistance, stands ready. Its wide, often unglazed doorway, sometimes fitted with heavy wooden shutters that are thrown open during working hours, seems like a cavernous mouth, promising both heat and transformation. The roof, whether of thick thatch, wooden shingles, or even slate if the region and resources permit, is invariably darkened by years of accumulated smoke that has found its way through any vent or opening. Inside, the smithy is initially a place of deep shadows and a palpable coolness, the air still holding the night's chill. It is a space dedicated to the controlled violence of your craft, yet it possesses its own distinct, pragmatic order. Every tool, every piece of equipment has its designated place, born not of arbitrary tidiness, but of the relentless pursuit of efficiency in a trade where wasted movement means wasted heat and effort. The great bellows, the lungs of your forge, perhaps a double-chambered contraption of wood and tough, well-oiled oxhide, operated by a long, counterweighted wooden handle, or even a system of ropes and levers, stands silent but ready. You might give the leather a quick inspection, checking for any signs of cracking or undue stiffness, knowing that its consistent, powerful breath is vital. The forge itself, a raised hearth constructed of heavy stones or bricks, often lined with refractory clay to withstand the intense temperatures, is currently a dark, shallow pit. Its bed, a landscape of grey ash, unburnt charcoal ends, and the occasional piece of clinker from previous fires, awaits its daily rekindling. Dominating the central workspace is your anvil, the very soul of your workshop. It's a massive, formidable block of wrought iron, possibly with a harder steel face, if you are fortunate or have skillfully applied one yourself. Its broad, flat face is polished smooth in the areas of most frequent use, yet bears the honourable scars of countless shaping blows. Its tapered horn, essential for bending and shaping curves, juts out expectantly. The hardy hole, a square aperture in the face, is ready to receive the shanks of various cutting and shaping tools, while the pritchel hole, a smaller round aperture, serves for punching holes through hot metal. The entire massive assembly is often securely mounted on a huge buried section of tree trunk, chosen for its ability to absorb the immense repetitive shocks of your hammering. Ranged around the walls on sturdy wooden racks, or lying in ordered proximity to the anvil and forge, is your arsenal of hammers. There are heavy two-handed sledgehammers, their long handles allowing for powerful, momentum-driven blows, used primarily by you or a strong apprentice for the initial breaking down of raw iron blooms or the drawing out of thick, stubborn bars. More numerous are the hand hammers, varying in weight from perhaps 1 to 4 pounds, their faces carefully shaped, flat for general forging, slightly domed or crowned, to prevent leaving sharp marks, cross panes, with a wedge-shaped pine perpendicular to the handle for spreading metal or starting shoulders, and ball panes with a hemispherical pine for riveting or shaping concave forms. Each hammer has its specific feel, its balance, its purpose, and you select them by ingrained instinct. Tongs, it seems, are everywhere, a veritable forest of them, hanging from pegs, leaning against the forge, lying on the packed earth floor. There are hundreds of variations, their long reins providing the necessary distance from the searing heat, their jaws precisely shaped to grip different forms of hot metal securely. Flat-jawed tongs for holding flat bars, V-bit tongs for square or round stock, bolt tongs with curved recesses for holding round bars firmly, pickup tongs for retrieving dropped pieces from the fire or floor, and countless specialized forms you have likely forged yourself to accommodate a particular job or a personal preference. The ability to quickly select the correct pair of tongs and to grip the hot iron with just the right amount of pressure, not so loose that it shifts, not so tight that it mars the surface, is a fundamental skill. Chisels for cutting hot metal, hot sets, or cold metal, cold sets. Punches of various diameters and shapes. Round, square, rectangular for creating holes. Drifts of tapered steel for enlarging and shaping those punched holes. Fullers, both top and bottom tools, with rounded edges for creating grooves. Spreading metal or shaping shoulders. And swages, again top and bottom tools, with shaped recesses for forging round, hexagonal or other specific sections. These tools, many of which are your own handiwork, forged from precious scraps of steel and carefully heat-treated, represent a significant investment of time and skill. They are the vocabulary of your shaping language. The slack tub, a large wooden barrel, perhaps an old wine cask sawn in half, or a trough carved from stone, is filled with water. Its contents are invariably dark, almost black, from the constant quenching of hot iron and the accumulation of scale and ash. Its surface might reflect the first, tentative light filtering into the smithy. This water is not just for cooling. It is a critical element in the heat treatment process, the sudden immersion transforming the very nature of heated steel. Your first and most critical act of creation each day is not with iron, but with fire. The careful, methodical revival and cultivation of the forge fire is an art form in itself, a skill honed over years, absolutely essential for achieving the precise and varied temperatures your work demands. You begin by thoroughly clearing the forge bed of clinker, the hard, glassy, fused conglomeration of impurities, ash, and slag from the previous day's intense fires. Using a long-handled iron poker or a specialized clinker rake, you meticulously remove these residues, as they can impede airflow, lower the fire's temperature, and even introduce impurities into your work. A clean fire is an efficient fire. Once the hearth is clear, you carefully arrange a base of fresh charcoal. This is not done haphazardly. You select pieces of appropriate size, not too large, not too small. Typically hardwood charcoal, made from oak, beech or hornbeam, prized for its high carbon content and ability to generate intense, sustained heat. You might have a designated dry storage area for your charcoal, perhaps a covered bin or a section of the smithy protected from damp, as moist charcoal burns poorly and inefficiently. To ignite this carefully laid bed, you might employ a striker light, a piece of hardened steel, which you strike against a sharp-edged piece of flint, directing the resulting shower of sparks onto a small, carefully prepared nest of tinder. This tinder could be a variety of materials: a piece of dried amadou fungus, also known as hoof fungus, a handful of flax tow, or a piece of specially prepared charred linen charcloth, which catches a spark with exceptional ease. Once a tiny ember begins to glow within the tinder, you nurse it with infinite patience, shielding it from drafts, gently blowing on it, or fanning it with your hand, gradually adding the smallest, driest fragments of charcoal until a fragile flame flickers to life. Alternatively, if you were particularly careful the previous evening, you might have preserved live embers from your cottage hearth, or even from the forge itself, by burying them deeply in a pot filled with fine dry ash. These embers, carefully uncovered, can then be transferred to the fresh charcoal in the forge, providing a quicker start to the fire building process. This practice of carrying fire was common and conserved both tinder and effort. As the initial flames take hold and begin to consume the first pieces of charcoal, you start to gently work the bellows. The first puffs of air must be cautious, lest you blow out the nascent fire. As the flames strengthen and spread, your strokes on the bellows handle become more regular, more powerful. The leather sides of the great machine begin to sigh and groan, a deep rhythmic respiration that is the forge's waking breath. The air forced through the chuya, the clay or iron nozzle that directs the blast into the very heart of the fuel bed, intensifies the combustion. You watch the evolving fire with the critical eye of a master. The colors change. The initial reds of a tentative fire deepen and brighten, spreading through the charcoal bed. You observe the dance of the flames, the way the smoke rises. With your poker or a pair of long tongs, you begin to shape the fire, consolidating the burning charcoal, building it up around the tuyere to create a concentrated zone of heat. Your aim is often to create a hollow fire or a cave, a small, intensely hot chamber within the fuel bed, into which you will thrust the iron for heating. This ensures the metal is heated evenly and efficiently, and also helps to create a reducing atmosphere, low in oxygen, which minimizes the formation of excessive scale iron oxide on the surface of the hot iron. The air in the smithy begins to shed its morning chill, gradually warming with the forge's radiant energy, and the characteristic, sharp, slightly sulfuric aroma of burning hardwood charcoal becomes more pronounced, a familiar perfume that signals the true start of your working day. This careful, almost reverent cultivation of the fire is the foundation upon which all your subsequent work will be built. It is a dialogue with one of nature's most powerful and transformative elements. Before the clamor of customer demands fully descends, or while the forge fire is steadily building to its optimal working temperature, a process that can take a considerable time to achieve the deep, even heat required for heavy work, you might engage in a series of preparatory or maintenance tasks that are essential for the smooth and efficient running of your smithy. These are the quiet, often unseen, but crucial underpinnings of your craft. You might take this opportunity to meticulously inspect the faces of your principal hand hammers. Over time, even the best steel hammer faces can become rounded at the edges, or develop chips and mushrooming from countless impacts against hot iron and the unyielding anvil. A poorly shaped hammer face can mar the surface of your work, create stress concentrations in the metal, or even, in extreme cases, send dangerous slivers of steel flying. If a hammer needs redressing, it's a task you undertake with the same care you would apply to a customer's commission. This involves carefully heating the hardened steel of the hammerhead in the forge, a delicate operation, as overheating can ruin its temper. Once at the correct forging heat, you would skillfully reforge its profile on the anvil, perhaps using a flatter or a set hammer to restore the crisp edges and correct crown. This is followed by the critical processes of rehardening, heating to a precise cherry red and quenching swiftly in water or oil, and then tempering, carefully heating it again to a specific pale straw or darker straw color to reduce brittleness and impart the necessary toughness. A well-maintained hammer is an extension of your arm, a trusted friend. Similarly, you might examine your array of tongs. The reins handles can become bent from the leverage applied, or the bit's jaws might lose their precise shape, failing to grip the workpiece securely. A piece of hot iron slipping from tongs at a critical moment can be disastrous, leading to a ruined piece of work or a nasty burn. You would reheat and reshape any damaged tongs, ensuring the jaws meet correctly and provide a firm, reliable purchase on the various sizes and shapes of stock you handle. Many of your most specialized tongs are likely your own creations, forged to perfectly suit a particular type of job or your personal working style. This might also be the time to sort through a recent delivery of bar iron. If a traveling merchant has passed through, or if you've acquired a load from a more distant supplier. Iron in the 13th century was not the standardized homogeneous material of later eras. It was often produced in bloomery furnaces, resulting in a bloom of relatively pure iron mixed with considerable slag and impurities. This bloom would then be repeatedly heated and hammered shingled to consolidate it and expel much of the slag, forming it into rough bars. You assess the quality of these bars with a keen eye and experienced touch. You might examine a freshly broken end, looking at the fracture. A coarse crystalline structure might indicate impurities or poor refinement, while a finer, more fibrous grain is generally preferred. You might strike a bar and listen to its ring. Good quality, well-worked iron often has a clearer, more resonant tone. You make mental notes, or perhaps even physically mark the bars, categorizing them, some for rough, heavy work where utmost purity is less critical, others, cleaner and more reliable, reserved for tools, finer fittings, or critical welds. The availability and quality of your iron stock is a constant concern. Charcoal, your primary fuel, also requires careful management. You would check your stockpile, usually kept in a dry, sheltered area of the smithy or an adjoining shed. Good hardwood charcoal is essential. It burns hotter and cleaner than charcoal from softer woods. You might have a preferred supplier, a local charcoal burner whose methods you trust. You assess the charcoal By its appearance, well-carbonized pieces are black and somewhat shiny, not brown or woody. Its weight, good charcoal, is relatively light for its volume, and the way it fractures, it should break with a clean, almost glassy snap. Running low on charcoal, especially during a busy period, or if winter weather makes new supplies hard to obtain, is a serious problem. You would also ensure your slack tub is full of water, and that any other quenching mediums you might occasionally use, perhaps brine for a harder quench on certain steels, or, much more rarely for a village smith, oil for a less severe quench on delicate items, are ready. The area around the anvil is swept clear of tripping hazards. Your hardy tools, swages and fullers are checked and arranged for easy access. This methodical preparation, this attention to the details of your environment and materials, is not wasted time. It is the hallmark of a true craftsman, ensuring that when the real work begins you can focus all your energy and skill on the metal itself. The village is now fully alive. The sounds are more distinct, the rhythmic thud of a distant flail, if it's threshing season, the creak of the mill wheel, the calls of children playing, the bleating of sheep being driven to pasture. The wide doorway of your smithy, now likely thrown open to the growing daylight, begins to frame the figures of your first customers. Their needs will be diverse, a microcosm of the village's daily life and struggles. Each arrival presents a new challenge, a new problem for your skills to solve. Consider the arrival of Father Michael, the village priest. His expression troubled. He carries a heavy iron candelabrum from the small stone church, one of its arms broken, its pricket for holding the candle bent. The church, though humble, is the spiritual heart of the community, and its fittings, however simple, are treated with respect. This is not just a utilitarian repair. It carries a certain weight of communal significance. "Master Smith," he begins, his voice quiet but firm, a mishap during cleaning. "Can this be mended before Sunday Mass? The bishop himself may be passing through, and it would not do for the altar to be in disarray." You take the candelabrum. It's cold iron, surprisingly heavy. It's old, likely made by a smith of a previous generation. The break is clean, but at a point that bears stress. The bent pricket is a simpler matter. You examine the metal. It appears to be good quality wrought iron. "I will see to it, Father," you reply. "It will require a strong weld for the arm and care in reshaping the pricket. It should be ready by Saturday eve." The priest nods, a hint of relief in his eyes. "God bless your work, then." He leaves, and you turn your attention to the task. This is more than just a piece of metal. It's a symbol, and its repair requires not only technical skill, but a certain reverence for its purpose. You select a piece of iron bar of similar thickness to the broken arm. Your intention is not merely to stick the broken piece back on, but to forge a new, stronger section and integrate it seamlessly, or to scarf and weld the existing pieces with such skill that the join is almost invisible and immensely strong. The metal of the candelabrum and your new iron bar are thrust into the heart of the forge. Will, your apprentice, knows by your movements and the nature of the item that this requires careful heat. He works the bellows with a measured, consistent rhythm, his eyes darting between the fire and your face, anticipating your commands. "Watch the heat on the old iron. Will," you instruct, your voice calm but focused above the forge sips raw. "It may have impurities we don't know. Bring it up slowly. We need a good soaking heat for the weld, but we mustn't burn it." As the iron reaches a bright yellow, almost white heat, the crucial welding temperature, where the surface becomes incipiently molten, you signal "Will." Now, with swift, coordinated movements, you withdraw both pieces using appropriate tongs. Flux, a fine sandy mixture, has already been applied to the prepared, scarfed, angled ends of the metal to be joined. This flux will melt and flow, dissolving oxides and allowing the clean metal surfaces to fuse. You bring the glowing ends together on the anvil with precision. The first hammer blows are light and rapid, tap tap tappity tap, to set the weld, to make the surfaces adhere, and to drive out any trapped flux or slag. Then, as the weld begins to take, your blows become heavier, more authoritative, clang clang clang, consolidating the metal, hammering the two pieces into one indivisible whole. Sparks fly in a brilliant, almost violent shower. The sound of a good weld is distinct, a solid, ringing impact, different from the duller thud of unjoined metal. This process may need to be repeated along the length of the scarf, if it's a long one, each section brought to welding heat and hammered. The integrity of this weld is paramount. Once you are satisfied, you will reheat the joined section to a forging temperature and carefully hammer it to blend the contours, removing any sign of the join, making the arm appear as if it were forged from a single piece. Next, the bent pricket. This requires more delicate work. You heat only the bent section to a dull or cherry red. Too much heat could weaken the relatively thin spike. Using lighter tongs and perhaps the horn of the anvil or a specialized bending fork, you carefully straighten it, ensuring it is perpendicular to the arm and capable of securely holding a thick beeswax candle. While this work is progressing, other villagers arrive. Their needs varied. Marjorie, a widow from the edge of the village, brings a bundle of worn sickles. With the harvest approaching, these are her livelihood, her means of earning a meagre share by working in the Lord's fields or for more prosperous neighbours. Their edges are chipped and dulled from last year's use. Sharpening sickles is a common task. You examine each one. Some may only need their edges ground and honed. Others, more heavily damaged, might require reforging of the edge, carefully heating the thin steel, if they have a steel edge, which better sickles would, or iron blade, and drawing it out with light, precise hammer blows to restore its keenness, followed by careful re-hardening and tempering. This is painstaking work. You might set Will to work on the simpler ones, guiding him on the correct angle for the grindstone. A large, often foot-pedaled or hand-cranked sandstone wheel, kept wet with a trickle of water, or the use of a sharpening stone or file. For the more complex reforging, you handle it yourself. The distinctive shoosh of metal on the grindstone, or the rasp of a file, joins the smithy's symphony. Marjorie waits patiently, her hands clasped, knowing the quality of your work will directly impact her earnings. Later, a more imposing figure darkens your doorway. Sir Robert, a minor knight who holds a small estate nearby, or perhaps a man-at-arms in the service of the local baron. He leads a fine warhorse, and with him is his squire, carrying a dented steel helmet and a sword whose scabbard fitting has broken. This is high-stakes work. The knight's life can depend on the integrity of his equipment. "Smith," Sir Robert announces, his voice accustomed to command. "My charger needs 2 new shoes on the forehooves." He cast one on the road from Oakhaven, and this helm took a heavy knock in practice. See if you can beat out the worst of it. The scabbard mount needs urgent attention too. I cannot have my blade loose. You nod respectfully, your gaze professional as you assess the tasks. Shoeing a valuable warhorse is different from shoeing a farm nag. The shoes might be of better iron, more carefully shaped for speed and grip. The horse itself is likely more spirited. You approach it with calm confidence, speaking soothingly, your hands gentle but firm as you examine its hooves. The process of preparing the hoof, forging the new shoes with precise fullering for the nail heads, hot-fitting them with expert care, and nailing them securely, takes considerable time and all your farrier skill. You ensure the clinches are smooth and tight, no pressure on the sensitive parts of the hoof. Repairing the dented helmet is a different challenge. It's likely made of good quality steel. You examine the dent. It's significant, but hasn't pierced the metal. You won't be able to simply hammer it out from the inside without a specialized anvil head, a stake anvil. You might need to construct a shaped wooden block to support the inside. Then use a carefully chosen hammer with a domed face to gently, progressively work the dent out from the outside, using many light blows rather than a few heavy ones, to avoid stretching or cracking the steel. This requires immense patience and a feel for how the metal moves. Each blow must be considered. You might need to slightly heat the area locally with a small focused flame if the steel is very resistant, but this is risky as it can affect the helmet's temper. The broken scabbard fitting, perhaps a metal loop or chape, will require you to either forge a new piece to match the old or to braze or rivet the existing pieces if possible. This is fine, detailed work, involving small components and neat finishing. The knight and his squire watch your every move, their expressions critical. Your reputation extends beyond the village. Work for the gentry, if done well, can bring prestige and better payment. Throughout these varied and demanding tasks, the forge fire must be constantly managed. Will, under your watchful eye, learns the rhythm of adding fresh charcoal, of clearing the tuer if it becomes blocked, of adjusting the bellows to provide the precise type of heat needed for each job, a deep, soaking heat for heavy forging, a quick, intense heat for welding, a softer, more controlled heat for tempering. He also learns to anticipate your needs, having the next tool ready or positioning the slack tub conveniently. He is your second pair of hands, your shadow, and the future of the craft if he has the aptitude and dedication. His small mistakes, letting the fire cool too much, fumbling with tongs, are met with your gruff but instructive corrections. No, lad, hold the tongs thus, a firm grip but not a death grip. Feel the balance, and watch the colour. Always watch the colour. The iron speaks to you through its colour. Okay, let us make that transition. We will shift from the clang of metal and the heat of the forge to a world quieter, yet filled with its own intense struggles and profound knowledge. We have felt the searing, honest heat of the blacksmith's forge upon our skin, the rhythmic concussion of hammer on anvil vibrating through bone. We have known the bite of quarry dust in our lungs, the relentless, aching toil of the stone. We have tasted the salt spray and felt the splintered wood of the galley oar, our muscles burning with the endless demand of the sea. We have walked the muddy furrows of the surf's field, our backs bent under the weight of obligation and an uncaring sky. These were journeys into lives of raw physical exertion, of endurance against the overt and crushing forces of labour and servitude, tales of how the medieval world was built and maintained through sinew and sweat. But the tapestry of that age is woven with more than just the threads of such overt toil. There exists another kind of struggle, another form of essential work, often performed in quieter spaces, in the liminal zones between the known and the mysterious. It is a battle waged not against inert matter or the demands of a lord, but against the insidious creep of sickness, the agony of injury, the pervasive fear of unseen ailments, and the ever-present shadow of mortality. It is a craft reliant not on brute force, but on keen observation, on ancient knowledge passed down through whispers and practice, on a deep intimacy with the secrets held by the earth itself. So now, let the phantom scent of coal smoke and hot iron fade from your senses. Allow the imagined calluses to soften on your palms. Let the echo of the anvil's song recede. We are to inhabit a different vessel, to borrow the consciousness of one whose hands, though perhaps equally hard-working, moved with a different intent. Your hands will now learn the texture of leaves, the resilience of roots, the subtle weight of dried herbs. Your eyes will not seek the telltale colours of heated metal, but the faintest flush on a fevered cheek, the cloudy sediment in a glass vial, the flicker of pain or hope in another's gaze. Your keenest tool will not be of iron, but your own sharpened perception, your knowledge of the green world, and the fragile trust of those who seek your aid. Quiet your mind. Let the clamour of your own time fall away like a shed skin. We are stepping across the threshold of a low-roofed cottage, perhaps nestled at the edge of a village, where the air is thick with the complex aromas of drying plants, simmering decoctions, and the faint, clean scent of wood smoke from a carefully tended hearth. This is the domain of the traditional healer, the village herbalist, the wise woman or man, a figure both essential and, at times, viewed with a mixture of respect and trepidation in the heart of the 13th or 14th century. Your breath now is the earth's breath, your wisdom gleaned from observing its cycles. You are the guardian of remedies, the interpreter of symptoms, a fragile bulwark against suffering in an age where life was often precarious and brief. You are the healer. The first light to greet your waking eyes is not the harsh glare of a forge, nor the dim oppression of a windowless hut, but a soft, diffused illumination filtering through a small, horn-paned window, or perhaps an oiled linen screen. It might be the pale grey of pre-dawn, or the gentle gold of early morning, depending on whether the urgent rap of a worried villager has disturbed your slumber, or if nature itself has called you forth. You rise from a bed that is likely a simple wooden frame, strung with ropes, softened by a straw-filled pallet, and covered with rough woolen blankets. The air in your cottage, unlike the metallic tang of a smithy or the smoky fug of a peasant's hut, carries a unique and complex perfume. The dry, earthy scent of herbs hanging in bunches from the rafters, the sweet, pungent aroma of roots and barks stored in earthenware jars or wooden chests, the faint, lingering fragrance of a poultice prepared late last night, and the clean, slightly bitter smell of wood smoke from your hearth, where a pot of water might already be gently warming. Your body, though perhaps no stranger to the ache of long walks foraging or the strain of grinding tough roots, moves with a quiet deliberation. There is a calmness in your initial moments, a centering before the demands of the day fully assert themselves. You dress in simple, practical garments of homespun wool or linen, perhaps dyed in muted, earthy tones, using plant-based dyes you yourself have prepared, a long tunic, leggings, or a skirt, an apron with pockets to hold small tools or gathered herbs. Your hands, though clean, bear the faint stains of plant juices, the skin perhaps a little rough from handling bark and soil, but also surprisingly supple from the oils and salves you frequently prepare and apply. Your dwelling is both home and workshop, a sanctuary of healing knowledge. It is likely small, perhaps 1 or 2 rooms, with walls of wattle and daub or rough stone, and a floor of packed earth or uneven flagstones, kept meticulously clean. Bunches of herbs, in various stages of drying, hang everywhere, from the low rafters, along the walls, above the hearth, creating a rustling, fragrant canopy. You recognize each one by sight, by scent, even by the subtle sound its dried leaves make when disturbed by a draught. Chamomile for calming, yarrow for fevers and staunching blood, plantain for wounds, comfrey for mending bones, valerian for troubled sleep, thyme and sage for coughs, rosemary for memory and cleansing. Shelves along the walls hold an array of containers, stoppered earthenware jars filled with dried leaves, flowers, seeds, and powdered roots. Wooden boxes containing precious resins or dried fungi, small glass vials, rare and treasured, holding potent tinctures or oils. A sturdy wooden table serves as your main workspace. Upon it might lie a selection of your tools, a sharp knife for chopping fresh herbs, a smaller, finer blade for delicate work, a heavy mortar and pestle of stone or wood for grinding and pounding, a chopping block worn smooth with use, scales for measuring, though often your experienced eye and hand are your primary guides, and pieces of clean linen or muslin for straining decoctions or making poultices. A small hand mill for grinding tougher seeds or roots might sit in a corner. Your hearth is not just for warmth and cooking your own simple meals, but also for preparing many of your remedies, for simmering decoctions, for gently infusing oils, for drying herbs that require a little warmth. Copper or iron pots of various sizes hang near it. Your garden, if you are fortunate enough to have one adjoining your cottage, is a living extension of your apothecary. It is not a decorative space, but a carefully cultivated collection of essential medicinal plants. Neat rows or artfully arranged clumps of hyssop, lavender, rue, calendula, borage, fever, few, and many others, each chosen for its specific virtues. You tend this garden with care, knowing the optimal times for planting, for harvesting leaves, flowers, or roots to ensure their peak potency. You understand the needs of each plant, which prefer sun, which shade, which soil. This garden is a testament to your foresight and your intimate connection with the green world. The day's work often begins with attending to tasks within your cottage or garden. You might check the herbs that are drying, turning them gently to ensure even desiccation and prevent mold. You might sort through a basket of freshly foraged plants from the previous day, separating leaves from stems, cleaning roots of clinging earth. Or you might begin the slow, methodical preparation of a specific remedy needed for a patient you expect, or one that you always keep in supply. This could involve the patient grinding of dried roots into a fine powder using your mortar and pestle, the rhythmic thud, a familiar sound in the quiet of the morning. Or perhaps you are carefully chopping fresh leaves, their volatile oils releasing a pungent aroma into the air, preparing them for a poultice or an infusion. Soon, the first knock on your door might come. It could be a young mother, her face etched with worry, carrying a fretful child with a hot brow and a rasping cough, or an elderly farmer, his hands swollen and inflamed from a festering thorn prick, or a youth who has taken a nasty fall, his arm clearly broken. Each arrival brings a new story of pain, a new challenge for your skills. Your approach to diagnosis is one of careful observation and listening, a blend of empirical knowledge and intuitive understanding. You look closely at the patient, the color and texture of their skin, the brightness or dullness of their eyes, the state of their tongue, the nature of any visible wounds or swellings. You listen intently to their description of their symptoms, where the pain is, when it started, what makes it better or worse. You might gently feel their pulse, noting its strength and rhythm. You might examine their urine if they bring a sample in a small pot, observing its color, clarity, and sediment. For in the medieval understanding of humors, this was considered a vital diagnostic tool. You ask questions, your voice calm and reassuring, trying to piece together the nature of the ailment. There are no complex machines, no laboratory tests. Your senses and your accumulated experience are your primary instruments. Consider the arrival of Alara, a young woman from the village, pale and drawn, complaining of a persistent hacking cough that leaves her breathless, and night sweats that soak her palate. You listen to her chest, perhaps placing your ear directly against her back, noting the quality of her breathing, any rattling or wheezing sounds. You observe the bluish tinge to her lips. This is more than a simple cold. Your mind sifts through your knowledge. Lungwort for the lungs, colt's foot to soothe coughs, perhaps a strengthening tonic of horehound and honey. But you also recognize the seriousness, the potential for consumption, tuberculosis, a dreaded and often fatal disease. Your treatment will be multifaceted. You might prepare a decoction of specific herbs for Alara to drink several times a day, perhaps a blend of elecampane root to clear the lungs, mullein leaves to ease inflammation, and thyme for its cleansing properties. You would instruct her on how to brew it, the importance of rest, of fresh air when possible, though medieval dwellings were often poorly ventilated, and of nourishing food, however simple. You might also prepare a poultice of warming herbs like mustard seed, mixed with flour and water, to be applied to her chest to ease congestion, and you would offer words of comfort, of encouragement, though in your heart you know the prognosis for such an ailment is often grim. You cannot promise a cure where nature and God have not willed it, but you can offer palliation, a lessening of suffering, and the solace of human care. Another common affliction is injury. Young Thomas, a woodsman's son, is brought in by his frantic father, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle below the knee, his face contorted in pain, a fall from a tree. You gently cut away his leggings to expose the injury. The bone is clearly broken, the skin perhaps grazed, but not open. Your first task is to try and set the fracture. This requires strength, skill, and a certain amount of courage from both you and the patient. You might give Thomas a strong infusion of willow bark tea beforehand, knowing its power to dull pain, aspirin's natural precursor. Then, with his father helping to hold him steady and provide counter-traction, you would carefully, firmly manipulate the broken ends of the bone back into alignment, feeling for the subtle click or grating that indicates they are correctly positioned. The boy's cries are sharp, but you remain focused, your touch sure. Once the bone is set, you need to immobilize it. You might use smooth, straight pieces of wood as splints, carefully padded with moss or soft cloth to prevent chafing. These are then bound securely around the limb with strips of linen. You would then likely apply a poultice of comfrey root, known as knitbone for its reputed ability to speed bone healing, directly to the area of the fracture under the splints. You instruct Thomas's father on how to care for him, to keep the leg elevated, to watch for excessive swelling or discoloration, and to bring him back for you to check the setting in a few days. The relief on the father's face, though still tinged with anxiety, is a small reward. Your foraging expeditions are essential, for the wild places are your primary pharmacy. Several times a week, or as needed depending on the season, and your supplies, you venture out from the village, a woven basket on your arm or a sack over your shoulder. and perhaps a small digging tool or a sharp knife. You might head towards the nearby forest, or the meadows along the riverbank, or the uncultivated hedgerows and waysides. Each environment offers its unique pharmacopoeia. In the deep shade of the forest, you search for lungwort with its spotted leaves, for the delicate wood sorrel, for specific barks like willow or oak, gathered carefully from young branches so as not to kill the tree. You might find valuable fungi growing on fallen logs, some with known medicinal properties, though you are also acutely aware of those that are deadly poisonous. You move quietly, your senses alert, observing the subtle signs of nature, the way certain plants grow in association with others, the time of day when their flowers are fully open, often considered the best time to gather for certain properties. The phase of the moon for many medieval herbals dictated specific lunar timings for harvesting to maximize potency. In the sunnier meadows and along streams, you might find meadowsweet for fevers and aches, plantain with its broad leaves for drawing out infection from wounds, johnswort for melancholy, though its use could be controversial, sometimes associated with warding off evil, yarrow, self-heal, and countless others. You know how to distinguish the true medicinal plant from its lookalikes, a skill that can mean the difference between a healing remedy and a dangerous poison. You gather only what you need, and with respect, perhaps offering a silent prayer of thanks to the plant or to the Creator for its gifts. You understand the importance of sustainable harvesting, ensuring that the plant populations will continue to thrive for future needs. Returning to your cottage, your basket filled with fragrant, earthy treasures, the work of preparation begins. Roots must be scrubbed clean of earth, then chopped or sliced for drying or immediate use. Leaves and flowers are carefully spread on drying racks in a warm, airy part of your cottage, away from direct sunlight, which can diminish their virtues. Some herbs might be hung in bunches from the rafters. The drying process is slow, requiring patience and vigilance to prevent mold or insect infestation. Once fully dried, they are stored in their designated jars or boxes, carefully labeled in your mind if not with written tags, literacy being a rare skill. The creation of your remedies is a meticulous craft. For a decoction, you might simmer tough roots or barks in water for an extended period to extract their active constituents. For an infusion, like a tea, you pour hot water over more delicate leaves or flowers and allow them to steep. Salves and ointments are made by infusing herbs in fat. Animal fat, like lard or tallow, was common, or olive oil, if available and affordable, or perhaps a locally produced nut or seed oil over a low heat for many hours, then straining the mixture and often adding beeswax to solidify it. Poultices are made by crushing fresh or dried herbs and mixing them with a warm moistening agent like bread, meal or clay, to be applied externally to draw out infection, reduce swelling or soothe pain. Each preparation has its own specific method, its own traditional formula, passed down through generations or learned through your own careful experimentation. You are not merely a dispenser of herbs. You are often a confidant, a counselor. Villagers bring you not only their physical ailments, but also their fears, their anxieties, their family troubles. You listen patiently, offering what comfort and practical advice you can. Your role often extends beyond the purely physical, touching upon the emotional and spiritual well-being of your community. Sometimes, a worried mother simply needs reassurance that her child's fever is a common one and will likely pass. Sometimes, an old man facing his own mortality needs a listening ear as much as a soothing draught for his aching joints. The relationship with the village priest can be complex. While the church generally tolerated the use of herbal remedies for common ailments, there was always a fine line. Any practice that smacked of pagan ritual, charms or incantations, not sanctioned by the church, could invite suspicion, even accusations of witchcraft or heresy, especially if you were a woman. You learn to be discreet, to frame your knowledge in terms of God's given bounty in nature. Your prayers for a patient's recovery are likely as important, in the eyes of the community, and perhaps your own, as the herbs you administer. Payment for your services is rarely in coin, especially from poorer villagers. More often, it is through barter, a chicken, a basket of eggs, a measure of grain, a newly spun skein of wool, a day's labor in your garden from a grateful farmer's son. You understand the precarious economy of your neighbors and are often generous, knowing that your own well-being is tied to that of the community. The seasons dictate much of your work. Spring brings a fresh bounty of young leaves and flowers, a time for replenishing your stocks and treating the coughs and chills that linger after winter. Summer is a time of abundant growth, when many herbs are at their peak potency, but also a time for treating injuries from increased outdoor labor or digestive upsets from spoiled food in the heat. Autumn is the season for harvesting roots and seeds, for preparing remedies for the winter ahead, and for treating the first colds and fevers as the weather turns. Winter is often a quieter time for foraging, but a busy time for treating respiratory ailments, chilblains, and the aches and pains exacerbated by the cold and damp. Your stores of dried herbs are crucial during these lean months. You witness the great cycles of life and death. You are there at births, perhaps assisting the local midwife, providing herbs to ease labor or help the mother recover. You are there at the bedsides of the dying, offering what comfort you can with soothing draughts or gentle words, easing their passage, even when a cure is beyond your reach. This constant proximity to suffering and mortality shapes you. It fosters a deep humility in the face of nature's power and the fragility of human life. There are triumphs: the child whose raging fever breaks after your ministrations, the deep wound that heals cleanly under your poultices, the broken bone that knits straight and strong. These bring a profound, quiet satisfaction. But there are also failures, times when all your knowledge and care are not enough, when a sickness progresses inexorably, or an injury proves fatal. These moments bring a heavy heart, a sense of your own limitations, and a renewed determination to learn more, to observe more closely, to seek ever deeper into the mysteries of healing. Your knowledge is not static. You are always learning, always observing. You might learn from an elderly woman in the village who remembers a remedy her grandmother used. You might cautiously experiment with a new combination of herbs, noting its effects. You might even glean some information from a traveling scholar or a monk from a distant monastery, renowned for its infirmary, if such a rare encounter occurs. But mostly, your teacher is nature itself, and the accumulated experience of your daily practice. As the years pass, your hands become more gnarled, your back perhaps a little more stooped from bending over your herb garden or your grinding stone. Your hair turns grey, but your eyes remain keen, your knowledge deeper, your intuition sharper. If you have an apprentice, perhaps a bright young girl or boy from the village, who shows a true aptitude and a compassionate heart, you begin to pass on your precious hard-won wisdom, just as it was once passed to you. You teach them to identify the plants, to understand their virtues, to prepare the remedies with care and respect, to listen to the patients with empathy. This is your legacy, not in written volumes, but in the living chain of healing knowledge. And so, as the light fades at the end of another long day, as you bank the fire on your hearth and tidy your workspace, surrounded by the silent, fragrant company of your drying herbs, there is a sense of profound purpose. You are not a lord or a lady, not a knight or a wealthy merchant. Your life is one of humble service, but in your small cottage, with your carefully gathered plants and your ancient wisdom, you hold a unique and vital place in the heart of your 13th century world. You are the healer, a tender of the afflicted, a keeper of nature's secrets, a quiet warrior against pain and despair. Your story is written not in ink, but in the relieved sighs of those you have comforted, in the mended bodies you have tended, in the enduring human quest for solace and healing, in a world that is often harsh and unforgiving. Now we turn to the 16th century, as the fires of European exploration burned bright in the hearts of sailors and adventurers. A tragic and enigmatic tale began to etch itself into the annals of North American history. This is the story of the Roanoke colony, an English endeavor to plant its flag in the New World, which culminated in a mass disappearance without a trace. To this day, over 4 centuries later, the mystery of over 100 souls vanishing from Roanoke Island remains one of the greatest unsolved puzzles in the history of colonialism. What truly happened to them? How could an entire colony, with all its preparations and hopes, simply vanish, leaving behind only one cryptic clue, Croatoan, carved into a post. The silence that followed their disappearance has echoed through the centuries, inviting endless speculation, desperate searches, and meticulous archaeological investigations, yet yielding no definitive answer. It's a ghost story, whispered in the winds off the Outer Banks, a persistent question mark in the narrative of human ambition and the unforgiving wilderness. To unravel the enigma of Roanoke, we must journey back to the vibrant and volatile era of Queen Elizabeth I, a powerful and visionary monarch who vigorously championed England's maritime expansion. This was a time of fierce competition among European powers. Spain, having firmly established its vast empire in the Americas, was relentlessly accumulating immense wealth from the gold and silver plundered from its colonial territories. England, then a burgeoning maritime power, yearned to rival Spanish hegemony and forge its own path to prosperity in the New World. The allure of untouched lands, untold riches, and strategic advantage against their Catholic rivals was irresistible. It was in this fervent atmosphere that Sir Walter Raleigh emerged, a figure emblematic of Elizabethan ambition and daring. A nobleman, courtier, soldier, poet, and an undeniable favourite of the Queen, Raleigh harboured a grand, almost romantic, vision to establish England's first permanent colony in North America. He envisioned this new land not merely as a source of raw materials, like timber, fish, and the tantalizing prospect of gold and silver, but also as a crucial strategic base. From such a stronghold, English privateers could launch attacks on the Spanish treasure fleets that routinely plied the Atlantic, disrupting their flow of wealth and asserting English naval power. Raleigh's vision was both economic and geopolitical, a bold stroke in the great game of European dominance. In 1584, Raleigh secured a highly coveted royal charter from Queen Elizabeth I. This charter granted him sweeping rights to explore and colonize vast territories in North America that were not yet claimed by other European powers. This immense region, later christened Virginia, a poetic tribute to Queen Elizabeth, famously known as the Virgin Queen, stretched for an astonishing breadth, encompassing what is now modern-day North Carolina, all the way north to Maine. It was a blank slate on the map, ripe for English assertion. Raleigh, despite his fervent enthusiasm, did not personally lead the initial exploratory expedition to the New World. Instead, he prudently dispatched two experienced captains, Philip Amadas and Arthur Barlow, in 1584 to conduct a preliminary reconnaissance. Their mission was to scout suitable locations for a future settlement, assess the natural resources, and gauge the disposition of the indigenous inhabitants. They reached an island off the coast of what would become North Carolina, an island the native people called Roanoke. This island, though largely flat and prone to marshy conditions, nevertheless offered a seemingly fertile landscape and promising natural resources. Barlow's report to Raleigh painted an idyllic picture. The soil is the most plentiful, sweet, fruitful, and wholesome of all the world. Crucially, Amadas and Barlow established the first significant contact with the local Algonquian tribes, particularly the Secotan and Croatoan. Their initial interactions were seemingly amiable, characterized by curiosity and exchange. As a gesture of goodwill, and perhaps an attempt to learn more about the English, the chiefs allowed two native individuals, Manteo and Wanchese, to return with the Englishmen to England. Manteo, a member of the friendly Croatoan tribe, proved especially cooperative and would become a vital interpreter and guide in subsequent English endeavours. Wanchese, from the Secotan tribe, grew increasingly wary and suspicious of the English intentions during his time abroad. These positive, albeit perhaps naive, reports from Amadas and Barlow, lauding the fertile land and seemingly welcoming natives, further ignited Raleigh's ambition and spurred him to plan a full-scale colonization effort. Inspired by these glowing accounts, in April 1585, Raleigh launched his first major colonization expedition. This venture, though ostensibly peaceful, carried a strong military character. It consisted of 7 ships and approximately 107 colonists, predominantly soldiers and sailors, led by the formidable Sir Richard Grenville. Grenville, a renowned naval commander, was a cousin of Rowley's and an experienced, if somewhat notoriously hot-tempered personality. Their primary mission was to establish a fort and initiate extensive exploration of the surrounding territories. Among the prominent figures on this voyage were Thomas Harriot, a brilliant scientist, mathematician, and linguist. Harriot meticulously documented the flora, fauna, and geography of the region, and critically, he produced one of the most detailed early ethnographies of the Native American tribes, titled A Brief and True Report of the Newfound Land of Virginia. His observations provided invaluable insights into the indigenous cultures and the natural bounty of the land. Also present was John White, a talented artist and cartographer, whose watercolors of the native inhabitants, their villages, and the natural landscape remain some of the most precious visual records of early colonial America. These paintings vividly captured the indigenous way of life before it was irrevocably altered by European contact. Upon their arrival at Roanoke Island, the expedition began to establish a settlement. However, despite the initial optimism, this first attempt at colonization quickly ran into severe difficulties. The colonists, many of whom were soldiers with little experience in farming or sustained living off the land, were more interested in prospecting for gold and silver, the elusive wealth that had enriched Spain, than in the laborious work of planting crops or building a self-sufficient community. Their supplies, though initially adequate, began to dwindle alarmingly. More critically, relations with the indigenous inhabitants, which had seemed so promising during Armada's and Barlow's initial visit, began to sour dramatically. Grenville's authoritarian and often brutal approach to the natives proved disastrous. A relatively minor incident, the reported theft of a silver cup from the English, provoked a disproportionately harsh response from Grenville. In a fit of rage, he ordered the burning of a native village, creating an irreparable breach of trust and sowing deep-seated animosity among the local tribes. This act of violence alienated many who might have otherwise been allies or trading partners, transforming cautious curiosity into overt hostility. By the spring of 1586, the situation had become dire. The colonists were facing severe food shortages. Their relations with the powerful Secotan tribe were openly hostile, and the promise of quick riches had evaporated. It was at this critical juncture that Sir Francis Drake, the legendary English privateer, arrived at Roanoke. Drake, fresh from a highly successful raiding expedition against Spanish settlements in the Caribbean and Florida, stopped at Roanoke to check on the struggling English outpost. Seeing their desperate plight, Drake offered the colonists passage back to England. Seizing this opportunity, the majority of the surviving colonists eagerly abandoned their struggling settlement and returned with Drake. Unbeknownst to them, Grenville, who had returned to England for supplies and reinforcements, arrived at Roanoke shortly after Drake's departure. He found the site deserted, disappointed, but not entirely discouraged. Grenville left a small contingent of approximately 15 men behind to guard the abandoned fort and maintain England's claim on the territory. This small, isolated group, however, was incredibly vulnerable. Without the main body of colonists, they were easily overwhelmed and presumably killed by the now openly hostile native tribes. Thus, the first English attempt to colonize Roanoke ended in complete failure and loss of life, a grim precursor of the events to come. Despite this initial, costly setback, Raleigh remained remarkably undeterred. He understood that the failures of the first expedition stemmed from a fundamental flaw. It was a military outpost rather than a true colony designed for sustained settlement. He realized that a successful colony required more than just soldiers and prospectors. It needed families, skilled farmers, artisans, and individuals committed to building a new life in the unfamiliar wilderness, not simply seeking quick riches or engaging in conflict. In 1587, Raleigh organized a second colonization attempt, a far more ambitious and meticulously planned venture. This time, the expedition consisted of approximately 115 colonists, a diverse group that notably included women and children. This marked a crucial shift in strategy, signaling an intention to establish a permanent self-sustaining settlement that would grow organically. The expedition was entrusted to John White, the talented artist from the first voyage, who was now appointed governor. White, having witnessed the hardships and missteps of the previous attempt, understood the immense challenges ahead, but also harbored a deep personal stake in the success of the colony, as his own daughter, Eleanor Dare, and her husband, Ananias Dare, were among the colonists, and Eleanor was heavily pregnant. The colonists set sail from Plymouth, England, in May 1587, their hopes buoyed by the promise of a fresh start and the vision of a new English society in the Americas. Their instructions were clear: establish the colony not at the ill-fated Roanoke Island, but further north at Chesapeake Bay, a location that Harriet's earlier explorations had deemed more defensible, with better harbours and more fertile lands suitable for large-scale agriculture. This strategic move was intended to avoid the lingering hostilities that had plagued the first Roanoke settlement and to capitalize on superior natural advantages. However, upon their arrival at Roanoke Island in July 1587, a critical and ultimately catastrophic deviation from their plan occurred. Their pilot, Simon Fernandez, a Portuguese navigator who had been involved in privateering and was known for his erratic behavior, refused to take them any further north to Chesapeake Bay. Fernandez, arguably eager to return to the more lucrative business of raiding Spanish ships, unilaterally declared that he had completed his contract by bringing them to Roanoke and would not proceed. Whether this was a deliberate act of sabotage, a genuine misjudgment of the navigational complexities, or simply the harsh realities of late 16th century sailing conditions and contractual disputes, the consequences were dire. The colonists, against their will and against their specific instructions, were forced to disembark at the very site of the failed first colony, a land where previous English attempts had already sown seeds of mistrust and violence with the native inhabitants. This fateful decision immediately placed them at a significant disadvantage, inheriting a legacy of animosity and resource depletion. The early days of the new colony at Roanoke were marked by a sense of desperate urgency and a fragile optimism. The colonists immediately began the arduous work of repairing the dilapidated fort left by Grenville's men and constructing new dwellings. They were faced with the immediate challenge of creating a habitable settlement from scratch, all while battling the humid summer heat and the ever-present threat of unfamiliar diseases. They made concerted attempts to re-establish friendly relations with the local tribes, particularly the Secotan, but the lingering animosity from Grenville's brutal actions of 1585 proved an almost insurmountable obstacle, while Manteo, the friendly Croatoan, continued to serve as an invaluable bridge between cultures. The resentment among other tribes ran deep. This tension culminated in a tragic incident shortly after their arrival. One of the colonists, George Howe, was killed while crabbing alone in the Sounds, presumably by hostile natives. This act served as a chilling reminder of the inherent dangers and the precariousness of their existence. Recognizing the immediate and desperate need for more provisions, crucial tools for farming and construction, and potentially even more settlers to bolster their numbers, the colonists faced a difficult decision. Their supplies, already stretched thin by the unexpected diversion to Roanoke, were dwindling rapidly. It became clear that the colony's long-term survival hinged on obtaining immediate external support. In a unanimous plea, they implored their governor, John White, to return to England to gather these urgently needed supplies and reinforcements. White was deeply torn. He understood the immense responsibility of his governorship and the vital necessity of securing aid. Yet his heart was heavy with the thought of leaving his family behind, including his daughter Eleanor, his son-in-law Ananias, and most poignantly, his newborn granddaughter. On August 18th, 1587, a mere month after their arrival, Virginia Dare was born to Eleanor and Ananias. She was the first English child born in the Americas, a powerful, fragile symbol of hope, a tangible embodiment of the colony's aspirations for permanence and a new generational beginning in the New World. White, as her grandfather, undoubtedly felt a profound connection to this tiny, vulnerable emblem of the future. Despite his personal anguish, he ultimately agreed to undertake the perilous transatlantic journey, understanding that the colony's very survival depended on his quick return with vital provisions. Before White departed, a crucial agreement was made. a contingency plan for their fragile existence. Should the colonists, for any reason, decide or be forced to move from Roanoke to a new location, they would carve the name of their new destination into a prominent tree or a wooden post within the settlement. Furthermore, and this was a detail of profound significance, if they were in distress, if they had been attacked or forced to leave under duress, they would carve a cross above the name. This seemingly simple code was to be White's only guide upon his return, a desperate hope in the face of the vast unknown. With this solemn pact, John White sailed from Roanoke in late August 1587, leaving behind his entire family and the remaining 114 colonists, their fates inextricably linked to the success of his mission. White's journey back to England was immediately fraught with peril. The transatlantic voyage itself was notoriously dangerous, but upon his arrival in his homeland, he was met with an even greater, unforeseen obstacle: the escalating Anglo-Spanish War. King Philip II of Spain, in a monumental display of military might, was in the final stages of preparing his formidable Spanish Armada for a full-scale invasion of England. This was an existential threat to the English crown, a desperate struggle for national survival. In the face of this overwhelming national crisis, all available ships, resources and manpower were being diverted for the defense of the realm. Every able-bodied sailor, every merchant vessel, every available cannon was pressed into service to repel the impending Spanish invasion. This left absolutely no capacity for a transatlantic relief mission to a distant, nascent colony. White, desperate and consumed by anxiety for his family and the colonists, pleaded, he argued, he sought out any ship that would take him back to America. He offered payment, he appealed to patriotism, but his pleas fell on deaf ears amidst the feverish preparations for war. England's immediate survival took absolute precedence over the uncertain fate of a fledgling settlement across the ocean. The monumental defeat of the Spanish Armada in August 1588 was a monumental victory for England, a defining moment that secured its naval supremacy and averted a catastrophic invasion. It was a triumph that cemented Elizabeth I's legacy and reshaped the geopolitical landscape of Europe. However, for the Roanoke colonists, isolated and forgotten across the vast Atlantic, this victory was a tragic death knell. The very event that saved England from invasion simultaneously sealed their isolation. The war, though culminating in English triumph, had effectively cut them off from their lifeline. Even after the Armada was routed, shipping remained a complex and dangerous endeavour. Privateering still dominated the seas, and ships suitable for a transatlantic voyage were scarce and expensive. It took an agonizingly long time for White to finally secure passage back to America. He managed to do so only by joining a privateering expedition in March 1590, persuading the captains to take a detour to Roanoke before they pursued their quest for Spanish treasure. By this point, almost 3 years had agonizingly passed since White's departure from Roanoke. The unforgivable delay was devastating, a stark testament to the brutal realities of transatlantic travel, the precariousness of colonial ventures, and the overwhelming priorities of a nation at war. White and his crew finally reached Roanoke Island on August 18, 1590. The timing was poignantly symbolic. It was the 3rd birthday of his granddaughter Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. As White's ship approached the settlement, a profound sense of foreboding hung heavy in the humid air. The fort stood silent, eerily devoid of any activity. There were no welcoming shouts, no lights emanating from within, no telltale smoke from cooking fires rising into the sky. An unsettling stillness permeated the entire area. As they disembarked and cautiously entered the abandoned settlement, White immediately sought the crucial sign they had agreed upon 3 years earlier. His eyes scanned the familiar landscape, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. He found it carved into a prominent tree near the entrance to the fort, the word Croatoan. His gaze then shot to the top of the carving, searching for the prearranged distress signal. Critically, there was no cross carved above the name. According to their prior agreement, this absence signified that the colonists had not been in distress when they departed. This detail, though seemingly minor, would become one of the most perplexing and debated clues in the entire mystery. Further investigation of the abandoned settlement only deepened the enigma. The houses, rather than appearing hastily abandoned or destroyed in a sudden attack, seemed to have been systematically dismantled. This suggested an organized, deliberate departure, not a panicked flight. All heavy objects that the colonists had brought with them, their chest of valuable drawings, their carefully prepared maps, their heavy tools and cannons, had been removed. This implied that they had left with at least some degree of preparation and purpose, taking their essential belongings with them, rather than fleeing in a desperate rush. The only other visible clue found was the fragmented word carved into a nearby tree, likely an unfinished carving of croton, indicating perhaps a hurried or interrupted completion of the message. White desperately searched for any other sign, any other indication of their fate, any discarded item, any human remains, but found nothing. The colony, consisting of over 100 souls, had vanished as completely as if swallowed by the earth itself. The silence was absolute. The word crotoane provided the primary, indeed the only, lead in the investigation of the vanished colonists. Crotoane was the name of a friendly Native American tribe who inhabited what is now Hatteras Island, located approximately 50 miles south of Roanoke. It was also the name of the island itself, a significant detail. Manteo, one of the two Native Americans brought back to England by Amadas and Barlow in 1584, was a revered member of the Crotoane tribe and had consistently remained loyal and friendly to the English. Given the amicable relationship that the English had cultivated with the Crotoane people, it was the most logical and plausible assumption that the colonists, facing hardship, resource scarcity, or threats from hostile tribes, had sought refuge with their known allies. White's immediate, desperate plan was to sail directly to Croatoan Island to investigate. He felt a powerful magnetic pull towards that name, convinced it held the key to his family's whereabouts. However, fate, or perhaps a cruel turn of the weather, intervened once more. A series of violent storms suddenly struck the Outer Banks, renowned for its treacherous shoals and unpredictable weather. The powerful gales battered White's ship, making passage to Hatteras Island extremely dangerous. The ship's crews, already exhausted from the long voyage and now dangerously short on fresh water and other vital supplies, refused to delay further. They argued that it was too risky to attempt landing on Hatteras in such conditions, and that their primary mission of privateering called them elsewhere. With no other choice, and no power to command the privateering vessel, White was forced to return to England without ever reaching Croatoan. He spent the remaining years of his life, until his death around 1593, haunted by the profound silence and the unresolved fate of his daughter, son-in-law, and granddaughter, and the entire lost colony, never knowing what truly became of them. His final entries in his journal are filled with a palpable anguish, a desperate plea for answers that would forever elude him. The mystery of the lost colony of Roanoke has captivated historians, archaeologists, and amateur sleuths for centuries, sparking countless theories, extensive investigations, and an enduring cultural fascination. Each theory attempts to reconcile the exceedingly limited evidence, a single word carved into a post, with the profound and unsettling silence that descended upon Roanoke Island. The absence of bodies, struggle, or clear signs of conflict has only deepened the puzzle, allowing for a wide range of interpretations. One of the most enduring and widely accepted theories is the assimilation theory. This proposes that the colonists, facing a combination of starvation, unfamiliar diseases, dwindling resources, and constant threats from hostile tribes, sought refuge and eventually integrated with friendly Native American groups. The Croatoan tribe, given the carved word and their historically friendly disposition towards the English, is the prime candidate for this integration. Over time, the theory suggests, the English colonists would have intermarried with the native population, gradually adopted their customs, language, and way of life, and in essence ceased to exist as a distinct English entity. They would have become lost, not through death, but through absorption. This assimilation theory is supported by several compelling pieces of circumstantial evidence. Firstly, the lack of a cross carved above Croatoan is a crucial detail. It suggests a planned, deliberate departure, not one under duress or distress. If they had been attacked or fleeing for their lives, a cross would have been carved, according to their agreement with white. Secondly, the Croatoan tribe, particularly through Manteo, had demonstrated a consistent friendly and cooperative relationship with the English. It would have been the most logical and safest refuge for the struggling colonists. Furthermore, later accounts from other European explorers and early English settlers in the region provide tantalizing, though unconfirmed, hints that support this theory. In the early 1700s, John Lawson, an English explorer, surveyor, and historian, extensively explored the Carolina interior and documented the native tribes. He encountered Native Americans in North Carolina who claimed to be descendants of the Roanoke colonists. These individuals reportedly possessed certain English characteristics. Some had lighter skin and grey eyes, spoke a dialect that included some English words, and even possessed a rudimentary knowledge of Christianity. One specific group, the Hatteras tribe, believed to be a continuation of the Croatoan, was noted by Lawson to have fairer complexions and some English loanwords in their vocabulary, leading him to conclude that the lost English colony was received and entertained by the Hatteras Indians. While these anecdotal accounts are incredibly compelling and provide a powerful narrative link, they are not definitive proof and are open to interpretation, potentially embellished or misunderstood over generations. Another significant piece of evidence, albeit ambiguous, comes from William Strachey, the secretary of the Jamestown colony, who arrived in Virginia in 1610. Strachey reported that the powerful Powhatan chief, Wahunsanakok, more commonly known as Powhatan, the father of Pocahontas, had confessed to attacking and killing a group of English settlers. However, Powhatan's motives were complex, and his confessions often self-serving. He claimed to have attacked a group of English settlers who were living with the Chesapeake tribe, a different indigenous group located further north from the Croatoan. This could suggest a possible conflict with a rival tribe that had harbored some of the Roanoke colonists, or perhaps Powhatan was simply boasting of his power or fabricating stories to deter further English encroachment into his territory, or to explain away the presence of white individuals among tribes he sought to dominate. It's also possible that Strachey, receiving information through interpreters, misunderstood the nuances of Powhatan's statement. The attack theory posits that the colonists were massacred by hostile Native American tribes. This theory gains some initial credence from the increasingly strained and often violent relations the English had with some of the Secotán villages, particularly after Grenville's provocative actions in 1585. If the colonists were isolated, vulnerable, and perceived as a growing threat, they could have fallen victim to a coordinated attack by vengeful tribes. This would explain their sudden disappearance and the absence of any survivors to tell the tale. However, several crucial pieces of evidence weaken this theory. The lack of any significant battle remains, such as weapons, scattered personal effects, or numerous human remains within or around the fort, is a glaring omission. If a massacre had occurred, one would expect to find signs of a violent struggle. Furthermore, the meticulously organized dismantling of the houses and the removal of heavy, valuable items contradict the notion of a hasty retreat from an overwhelming attack. A group under sudden assault would likely abandon their possessions in a desperate flight, not systematically pack them up. While isolated skirmishes or the death of a few colonists, like George Howe, were certainly possible, a full-scale massacre of the entire colony without leaving substantial evidence seems less likely given the archaeological findings. A less favoured variation of the attack theory suggests that the Spanish may have been responsible for the colony's demise. Spain, as the dominant European power in the Americas, was intensely wary of any English attempts to establish a permanent foothold in North America, viewing them as a direct threat to their colonial claims and their lucrative treasure routes. Spanish patrols frequently swept the Atlantic coast, and it's conceivable that they discovered and destroyed the English colony. However, this theory lacks substantial supporting evidence. No Spanish records or contemporary accounts definitively confirm such an action. The Spanish, who often meticulously documented their colonial exploits and would have been keen to boast of eliminating an English threat, have no verifiable records of attacking Roanoke. The absence of any Spanish claim to have destroyed the colony strongly suggests they were not directly involved in its disappearance. The disease and environmental disaster theory offers another plausible, though not entirely satisfactory, explanation. Life in the late 16th century was exceptionally brutal, and early colonial attempts across the globe often failed due to widespread disease, famine, and harsh environmental conditions. The Outer Banks region around Roanoke was and still is prone to extreme weather events, including powerful hurricanes and prolonged droughts. A severe drought could have decimated their crops, exhausted their freshwater supplies, and driven away game, rendering survival unsustainable. If a catastrophic event like a prolonged drought or a widespread epidemic, such as dysentery, influenza, or other diseases for which the Europeans had no immunity and the natives limited immunity, struck the colony, the colonists might have been forced to disperse in desperate search of food, water, or healthier environments. They could have ultimately succumbed to the elements, starvation, or hostile encounters while migrating. This theory is plausible in terms of the general hazards of colonial life, but it doesn't fully explain the complete absence of any bodies or a mass grave, nor does it entirely account for the deliberate carvings and organized departure. One would expect at least some scattered remains or evidence of mass illness if disease or famine were the sole cause of their demise. The migration theory proposes that the colonists, facing a combination of resource scarcity, ongoing tension with some native tribes, and perhaps the long-delayed return of John White, simply decided to pack up and move elsewhere in search of a more suitable or safer location. The Croatoan carving would then be a direct and accurate indicator of their intended primary destination. This theory aligns strongly with the archaeological observation that the houses were dismantled and that heavy, valuable items were deliberately removed. These actions point to an organized, planned departure rather than a desperate, chaotic flight. If they migrated to Croatoan, as the primary clue suggests, what then? Why did they vanish so completely from the historical record? Why didn't they attempt to reconnect with any future English expeditions, particularly those from the Jamestown colony just 2 decades later? The answer might lie in the complexity of their integration. If they truly assimilated, their identity as English colonists would have dissolved over time, their descendants becoming indistinguishable from the native population, with only faint whispers of their European ancestry surviving in oral traditions or physical traits. Alternatively, the colonists might have split into smaller groups, a possibility that accounts for the disparate hints found decades later. Some might have gone to Croatoan, while others ventured further inland. This concept of a splintered colony has gained increasing traction among researchers. In recent decades, archaeological investigations have intensified, leveraging modern techniques and a more nuanced understanding of early colonial dynamics and Native American cultures. These efforts have offered tantalizing new avenues for research and have begun to shed more light on the possible fate of the colonists. One of the most significant efforts has been the continued excavation of Hatteras Island, the historical site of Croatoan. In 1998, archaeologists working there discovered a 16th century signet ring bearing a lion crest, an artifact almost certainly of English origin. Subsequent research linked this ring to the Kendall family, who were associated with the Roanoke voyages. Further excavations at Hatteras have unearthed numerous pieces of 16th century English pottery, flintlock mechanisms, and other European artifacts. While these finds don't definitively prove the sustained presence of the Roanoke colonists themselves, they strongly suggest a prolonged and significant interaction between the English and the Croatoan tribe during that period. If English artifacts were being used or traded on Croatoan, it stands to reason that some English people, perhaps survivors or integrated colonists, were indeed present there. This discovery provides the most concrete archaeological support for the assimilation theory. More recently, research has focused on what are sometimes referred to as Site X or Site M, located inland along the Albemarle Sound, a significant distance west of Roanoke Island. This area was identified through a highly intriguing detail on an old map made by John White himself. White's La Virginia Pars map, created in 1585, prominently features a small, nearly invisible blue and red, four-pointed star, or fort symbol, that was later covered by a patch of paper on the finished map, but revealed by modern imaging techniques. This symbol appeared to indicate a fort or settlement far from Roanoke Island. Excavations at this specific location, near what is now Bertie County, North Carolina, have uncovered fragments of 16th century English pottery, similar to those found at Jamestown, traces of a structure, and other European artifacts. These findings strongly suggest that a small contingent of the Roanoke colonists might have indeed moved inland, perhaps seeking refuge from the increasingly hostile coastal tribes, or searching for more fertile land and better resources, or even attempting to reach the originally planned Chesapeake Bay destination. This discovery lends significant weight to the idea that the colony may have split. It's plausible that, facing overwhelming challenges, and having waited for White's return for an extended period, the main body of colonists decided to move. Some might have gone to the friendly Croatoan, while others, perhaps a smaller group, ventured further inland, attempting to establish a new, safer settlement away from the dangerous coast. This splintering could explain why no single large group was ever found, and why the direct fate of the colonists remains so elusive. Different groups, facing different challenges, might have met different fates. The modern understanding of Native American history also provides crucial context that was largely absent in earlier investigations. The indigenous tribes of the Outer Banks and the Carolina mainland were not monolithic. They were complex societies with their own intricate political structures, long-standing alliances, and fierce rivalries. The arrival of the English, a new and powerful foreign element, undoubtedly disrupted this delicate balance of power. Some tribes, like the Croatoan, likely saw potential benefits in allying with the English, perhaps for trade goods, iron tools, or protection against rival tribes, like the Powhatan. Other tribes, particularly the Secatan under Chief Wingina, who later became openly hostile, perceived the English as a direct and existential threat to their land, resources, and traditional way of life. The ultimate fate of the Roanoke colonists was in all likelihood deeply intertwined with these intricate intertribal dynamics, a factor that was only partially understood or even actively ignored by early English historians, who often viewed native populations as undifferentiated savages. The enduring appeal of the Roanoke mystery lies precisely in its elusive and unresolved nature. There's no definitive smoking gun, no conclusive archaeological discovery, no indisputable historical document that unequivocally answers the question of what happened. It is a story of grand pioneering ambition, thwarted by unexpected setbacks, political upheaval, and the brutal, unforgiving realities of life in a new, untamed land. The colonists, caught between the painfully slow communication with their distant homeland and the unpredictable nature of the new world, were left largely to their own devices, their destiny shaped by forces largely beyond their control. The agonizing 3-year delay in White's return was perhaps the most decisive factor in their ultimate disappearance. Perhaps the most haunting and poignant aspect of the Roanoke mystery is the human element. More than 100 individuals, men, women, and children, including the innocent infant Virginia Dare, simply disappeared from the historical record, seemingly without a trace. Their hopes, their struggles, their daily lives, their fears, their very existence, all vanished into the mists of time, leaving only a single enigmatic word to echo through the centuries. The profound lack of a definitive closure means that their story remains open, a blank canvas for speculation, a powerful testament to the fragility of human endeavors in the face of the vast, indifferent unknown. It is a constant reminder that for all our advancements, history can still hold secrets, stubbornly resisting all attempts at full revelation. The story of the lost colony of Roanoke serves as a powerful, melancholic cautionary tale about the immense perils of early colonization, the profound challenges of cross-cultural encounters between vastly different civilizations, and the sheer unpredictability of history. It reminds us that even the most ambitious and well-intentioned plans can be undone by logistical failures, devastating political upheavals back home, and the unforgiving realities of a new and utterly alien frontier. While the full, unvarnished truth may forever remain buried beneath the shifting sands and dense forests of Roanoke and Hatteras Islands, or scattered across the oral traditions of forgotten tribes, the mystery continues to compel, a timeless riddle etched into the very fabric of American history. And so the question lingers, as it has for over 4 centuries, whispered on the Atlantic winds: what happened to the lost colony? What did Searotoan truly mean for those souls who vanished into the vast, wild and silent embrace of the New World? History, at its core, is an unending tapestry woven from threads of destiny, ambition and intrigue, some brilliantly illuminated, others shrouded forever in mists of mystery. We've journeyed through the oceanic expanses of time, tossed by the same relentless Atlantic waves that carried John White on his desperate, fruitless quest, sifting through the silent sands of Roanoke, trying to catch the ghostly whispers of a vanished colony. Their tale, a blurred chapter in the annals of exploration, underscores the profound fragility of human hope in the face of untamed wilderness and unforeseen complications. The disappearance of over 100 souls without a clear trace, leaving behind only the enigmatic carving of a single word, cemented the unsettling truth that even amidst the fervor of discovery and the clash for power, there are fissures where truth can vanish entirely, leaving imagination and endless speculation to run wild. But the wheel of time never ceases its turning, and the grand stage of history continually shifts. From the untamed wilderness of the New World, with its legends of lost colonists now etched into folklore, we now leap across that very same ocean, moving not centuries, but rather just 2 to 3 generations forward in time, landing in a different realm, the opulent yet rotting grandeur of 18th century Europe. Far from the crude wooden dwellings that may have long since crumbled to dust on Roanoke, we arrive at the glittering palaces overflowing with unspeakable wealth and treacherous secrets. Here the air doesn't hum with the quiet struggle for survival against nature's might, but rather crackles with the electric tension of social unrest, political maneuvering, and the intoxicating scent of scandal that would eventually consume a monarchy. No longer are we searching for lost bodies or cryptic carvings left by desperate settlers. Instead, our gaze turns to a different kind of disappearance, that of truth, reputation, and the very fabric of royal authority, all consumed by a scandal born not of the vast unknown, but of avarice, delusion, and a single, breathtaking piece of jewelry. This next chapter in our chronicle of boring history pulls back the curtain on a saga that, though far from the perils of uncharted lands, proves that human folly, insatiable desire, and the intricate dance of deception can be just as destructive as any hurricane or hostile tribe. Prepare to enter the gilded cages of Versailles, where the whispers of a single magnificent necklace would bring down an entire world. The unbearable weight of diamonds, the diamond necklace affair. In the suffocatingly ornate world of 18th century France, where powdered wigs obscured thinning hair and silks and satins concealed the anxieties of a nation teetering on the brink, a seemingly mundane transaction involving a piece of jewelry would ignite a conflagration that swept through the highest echelons of society. This was not a saga of empires clashing or armies marching, but a peculiar and profoundly destructive episode known as the Diamond Necklace Affair. It was a story of staggering ambition, desperate delusion, calculated deception, and a public relations disaster that would fatally undermine the prestige of the French monarchy, paving a treacherous path for the coming revolution. To understand the affair, we must first meet the key players, each a study in their own tragic flaws, brought together by an object of unparalleled beauty and astronomical cost. At the center of this glittering storm stood a necklace of almost mythical proportions. It was a masterpiece of 647 diamonds, weighing an astounding 2,800 carats, crafted by the Parisian jewelers Baumer and Bassange. Originally, it was intended for Madame du Barry, the chief mistress of King Louis XV. Louis XV, a monarch whose reign was characterized by extravagance and a gradual erosion of royal authority, had commissioned this dazzling piece in 1772. The jewelers spent years accumulating and cutting the perfect diamonds, meticulously designing a cascading arrangement of pendants, festoons and tassels that shimmered with an almost liquid fire. It was estimated to be worth an astronomical 1.6 million livres, a sum equivalent to roughly $15 million to $100 million in modern currency, or enough to fund a small navy. However, fate intervened. Before the necklace could be completed or delivered, Louis XV died in 1774, succumbing to smallpox. With his death, Madame du Barry fell from favour and was exiled from court. The jewellers, Baumer and Basson, found themselves in a precarious position. They possessed an unpurchased, bespoke masterpiece of unimaginable value, a veritable fortune tied up in a single, unsellable item. No private individual in Europe could afford such a trinket, and no other monarch dared to buy a piece so famously associated with the late king's scandalous mistress. Desperate, they sought to sell it to Louis XVI, and more importantly, to his young, vivacious, and famously extravagant Queen Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette, born an Austrian archduchess, arrived in France as a Dauphine at the tender age of 14, marrying the future Louis XVI. By the time the necklace became available, she was Queen of France, ruling over a court defined by its elaborate rituals, frivolous entertainments, and rigid social hierarchies. Marie Antoinette was a fashion icon, a trendsetter, and a lover of fine things. Her passion for elaborate hairstyles, exclusive gowns, and personal jewels was well known, and critics frequently accused her of excessive spending, earning her the moniker Madame Deficit. Yet, paradoxically, the Queen refused the necklace. On several occasions, Baumer and Basson approached her, imploring her to purchase it, even offering it at a reduced price and on generous installment plans. Her exact reasons for refusal are debated by historians. Some suggest genuine fiscal prudence, as the state was already deeply in debt. Others claim she saw no point in such an expensive, purely decorative item, preferring to spend royal funds on more useful acquisitions or on her beloved Trianon estate. Perhaps she also harboured a subtle aversion to owning a piece so strongly linked to Louis XV's scandalous former mistress. Regardless of her precise motivation, Marie Antoinette repeatedly stated, "We have more need of ships than of necklaces." Her refusal, however, would later be conveniently forgotten by her detractors. The jewellers were in despair. The necklace was their life's work, their capital, their very livelihood. It became an albatross around their necks, a monstrous liability. Its very existence, unsold and unloved, became a whispered testament to the Queen's perceived disdain for French craftsmanship or her fiscal conservatism. Enter Louis de Rohan, the Grand Almoner of France, a cardinal of the Holy Roman Church, and a man whose ambition vastly outstripped his political acumen. Rohan was a member of one of France's most ancient and powerful noble families, a prince of the church, and a man of immense personal wealth. He was also a notorious womanizer and a deeply vain individual who harboured an almost obsessive desire to curry favour with Marie Antoinette. Rohan had a significant personal problem. He had fallen out of favour with the Queen during his time as the French ambassador to the imperial court in Vienna, 1772 to 1774. He had engaged in indiscreet gossip about Marie Antoinette's mother, Empress Maria Theresa, and even about the young Dauphine herself. His letters had been intercepted, and his loose talk had reached the Queen's ears, earning him her lasting contempt. Being in royal disfavour was a crushing blow for a man of Rohan's standing. It hindered his career aspirations, particularly his burning desire to become the next Prime Minister of France. He desperately sought to regain the Queen's good graces, a return to the sunshine of her favour. This desperate yearning in Rohan, a man so powerful, yet so vulnerable to flattery and ambition, made him the perfect target for the principal architect of this grand deception. Jeanne de Valois Saint-Rémy, Comtesse de la Motte. Jeanne was a woman of extraordinary cunning, audacity, and charisma, but also of dubious lineage and desperate circumstances. She claimed direct descent from the royal Valois line, albeit through an illegitimate branch, a claim that gave her a veneer of ancient nobility, despite her impoverished reality. She was married to Nicolas de la Motte, a captain in the gendarmerie, and lived a life of constant financial struggle. Jane, a self-proclaimed penniless noblewoman, had arrived in Paris, determined to claw her way back into society. She was highly intelligent, manipulative, and possessed a remarkable ability to read people and exploit their weaknesses. She also had an uncanny knack for making powerful connections, often through sheer force of personality and well-placed lies. Upon learning of Cardinal de Rohan's desperate desire to re-enter the Queen's good graces, Jane saw an opportunity, a golden, diamond-studded opportunity. She initiated contact with Rohan, claiming to have gained the Queen's confidence and to be acting as her secret intermediary. She spun an elaborate web of lies, initially convincing Rohan that Marie Antoinette, constrained by court protocol and her own perceived austerity, wished to conduct certain delicate matters in secret, outside the formal channels of the court. Jane presented herself as the Queen's trusted confidant, a clandestine messenger, bridging the gap between the haughty Queen and the disgraced Cardinal. Rohan, blinded by his desperate ambition and fueled by Jane's masterful manipulation, fell for her elaborate charade. He believed her because he desperately wanted to believe her. He began to send her letters, gifts, and even money, all ostensibly intended for the Queen, as signs of his renewed devotion and loyalty. Jean's deception deepened. She began to forge letters, supposedly from Marie Antoinette to Rohan, written in an exquisite imitation of the Queen's handwriting. These letters, often flirtatious and seemingly intimate, gave Rohan hope that his rehabilitation was underway. They discussed political matters, court gossip, and eventually the Queen's supposed financial difficulties, planting the seeds for the ultimate scam. To further solidify her deceit, Jane enlisted the help of several accomplices. Her husband, Nicolas de la Motte, served as her enforcer and occasional messenger. More crucially, she recruited Marc-Antoine Nicolas de Saint-Maurice, known as Riteau de Villette, a former clerk of Rohan's and a master forger. Villette's skill at imitating Marie Antoinette's handwriting was essential to the success of the scam. He crafted the fake letters that fueled Rohan's delusion. The most audacious act of deception, however, involved a prostitute named Nicole d'Oliva, who bore a striking resemblance to Marie Antoinette. In August 1784, Jane arranged a secret, late-night meeting in the gardens of Versailles between Rohan and the Queen. D'Oliva, dressed in a white muslin gown, a style favoured by Marie Antoinette at her private retreat, the Petit Trianon, appeared for a few brief moments, handed Rohan a rose, and whispered a few words of forgiveness. Rohan, overwhelmed by emotion and convinced he was receiving a direct, intimate reconciliation with the Queen, was completely duped. This audacious theatrical performance solidified his belief in Jane's extraordinary access to the Queen and the secret nature of their supposed correspondence. By early 1785, Jeanne de la Motte felt confident enough to introduce the grand finale of her scheme, the diamond necklace. She approached Rohan, claiming that the Queen, despite her public refusal of the necklace, secretly desired to own it. The official refusal, Jeanne explained, was a mere pretense to avoid public outcry over such an extravagant purchase, while the nation faced financial distress. The Queen, according to Jeanne, wanted Rohan to act as her secret agent in acquiring the necklace from Beaumont and Bassange. He was to purchase it on her behalf, on credit, using his considerable name and standing to secure the deal. The Queen, she assured him, would then quietly reimburse him in installments. Rohan, blinded by ambition and his desperate desire to regain favour, swallowed the bait whole. The opportunity to be the Queen's secret confidant, to perform such a valuable clandestine service for her, was too tempting to resist. He approached Beaumont and Bassange, presenting himself as the Queen's authorised agent. The jewellers, though wary of a secret transaction, were desperate to offload their magnificent, unsellable masterpiece. They drew up a contract, stating that the necklace was being purchased on behalf of the Queen, with installment payments to begin at a later date. Rohan personally signed the contract, guaranteeing payment with his own immense credit. The total price was 1.6 million livres. On February 1st, 1785, the necklace was delivered to Rohan. In a moment of high drama, Rohan took the necklace to Jane de la Motte's house, believing he was delivering it directly to the Queen's trusted intermediary. Jane, in turn, passed it to her husband, Nicholas, who promptly dismantled the necklace. The diamonds were then taken to London by Nicholas and Villette, where they were sold individually to various jewelers and merchants. The vast, unique masterpiece was broken up and its components dispersed, quickly disappearing into the murky depths of the European diamond market. Jane and her husband used the proceeds to live a life of lavish extravagance, indulging in expensive purchases and flaunting their new wealth. The elaborate deception began to unravel in the summer of 1785. The first installment payment to Burma and Basang was due on August 1st. The jewelers, anticipating payment, approached the Queen's household for the money. They were met with utter bewilderment. Marie Antoinette, of course, knew nothing of the necklace, the secret purchase, or any agreement to pay for it. The jewelers, now deeply alarmed, tried to contact Cardinal de Rohan, who initially reassured them that the Queen would pay. However, when the payment failed to materialize, Burma and Basang eventually went directly to the Queen, explaining the entire transaction and presenting the signed contract bearing Rohan's signature and supposedly the Queen's approval. Marie Antoinette was utterly incandescent with rage and disbelief. Her reputation, already under relentless attack by libelous pamphlets and court gossip regarding her perceived extravagance and Austrian loyalties, was now irrevocably tied to this monstrous deception. She saw the affair not merely as a scam, but as a deliberate attempt to defame her, to paint her as a frivolous, irresponsible monarch who would secretly acquire a prohibitively expensive jewel while the people starved. Her honour, and by extension, the honour of the crown, had been brazenly assaulted. Louis XVI, a rather indecisive but well-meaning monarch, was equally enraged. He, too, saw the affair as an unforgivable assault on the monarchy's dignity. On August 15, 1785, the Feast of the Assumption, Cardinal de Rohan, dressed in his ceremonial robes, was about to celebrate Mass in the royal chapel at Versailles when he was abruptly arrested by King Louis XVI himself. In front of the astonished court, the king publicly demanded that Rohan explain himself. When Rohan, still in shock and confusion, could not produce a satisfactory explanation for his involvement or proof of the Queen's authorization, he was immediately taken to the Bastille. The arrest of a prince of the church, a cardinal, in the very precincts of the royal palace on a major feast day was an unprecedented act. It sent shockwaves through France, and indeed throughout Europe. It was a stark public humiliation of the highest order, one that signalled the monarchy's determination to clear its name, but also inadvertently dragged the sacred aura of the crown into the sordid realm of a public criminal trial. The trial, which began in May 1786, became a spectacular public spectacle, an early modern media circus that captivated the nation. The Paris Parliament, the highest court of justice in France, presided over the proceedings. The principal defendants were Cardinal de Rohan, Jeanne de la Motte, her husband Nicholas, and Réto de Villette. Nicole d'Oliva, the prostitute who impersonated the Queen, was also arrested, as was Giuseppe Balsamo, better known as Count Alessandro Cagliostro, a notorious alchemist and occultist who had been associated with Rohan and Jeanne, though his direct involvement in the necklace fraud was tenuous. The trial was meticulously documented, with pamphlets and broadsheets disseminating every salacious detail to an eager public. The public, already deeply cynical about the monarchy and the aristocracy, devoured the lurid revelations. Cardinal de Rohan's defense was led by the brilliant lawyer Jean-Baptiste Target, who skillfully presented Rohan as a naive, well-meaning nobleman, blinded by his desperate ambition and manipulated by the cunning Jenny de la Motte. Target argued that Rohan had genuinely believed he was acting on behalf of the Queen, and that he was himself a victim of Jenid's elaborate deceit. The defense relied heavily on the testimony of the jewelers, Boma and Basang, who confirmed that Rohan had genuinely believed he was acting as the Queen's agent. The fact that Rohan, a man of immense wealth, had no financial gain from the scam also lent credence to his plea of being a dupe. Jeanne de la Motte, however, offered a defiant and ultimately devastating defense. She presented herself as a victim of royal persecution, a wronged innocent, while simultaneously attempting to implicate Marie Antoinette in the fraud. She publicly claimed that she had indeed been the Queen's secret agent and that Marie Antoinette had orchestrated the entire affair, using Rohan as a scapegoat to acquire the necklace without public knowledge. She even suggested that Rohan and the Queen had a secret, illicit affair, and that the necklace was part of their clandestine dealings. These accusations, though baseless, resonated deeply with a public already predisposed to believe the worst about their queen. Jeanne de la Motte, despite her obvious guilt in the fraud, became a strange kind of folk hero to some segments of the public, perceived as a brave if cunning woman exposing the corruption of the court. The verdict, delivered on May 31st, 1786, was a mixed bag, but a public relations catastrophe for the monarchy. Cardinal de Rohan was acquitted. The Parliament accepted his argument that he had been an innocent dupe, manipulated by Jeanne de la Motte. While he was cleared of criminal charges, the court sentenced him to lose his offices and be exiled from court, a considerable professional and social humiliation, but a far cry from the execution or ruin that might have been his fate. This acquittal, however, was a devastating blow to the Queen. To the public, Rohan's acquittal implied that the court believed his story, that he had been tricked into believing the Queen wanted the necklace. It seemed to validate the idea that Marie Antoinette was indeed involved, at least indirectly, or that she was capricious and untrustworthy. Jeanne de la Motte was found guilty. She was condemned to be flogged, branded with the letter V for volus, thief on both shoulders, and imprisoned for life at the Salpêtrière prison. Her husband Nicolas was tried in absentia and condemned to the galleys for life. He had fled to England with the proceeds from the diamonds. Hito de Villette, the forger, was also convicted and banished from France. Nicole de Lever, the look-alike prostitute, was acquitted, as was Cagliostro, much to the chagrin of those who believed him to be a master charlatan. The immediate aftermath of the trial was a whirlwind of public opinion and royal despair. While the court had technically cleared the Queen of direct involvement, the damage to her reputation was catastrophic and irreversible. Rohan's acquittal was widely interpreted as an implicit condemnation of Marie Antoinette. The public, already simmering with resentment over royal extravagance, the nation's burgeoning debt, and the Queen's Austrian origins, seized upon the affair as irrefutable proof of her depravity and fiscal irresponsibility. The scandal fueled a deluge of vicious libelous pamphlets, crude caricatures, and scurrilous rumours that circulated widely throughout France. These pamphlets, often depicting the Queen as promiscuous, greedy, and indifferent to the suffering of her people, destroyed any remaining shred of public affection or respect for her. The affair was perceived not just as a criminal fraud, but as a moral failing of the highest order, a demonstration of the monarchy's corruption and decay. The public image of Marie Antoinette, already fragile, shattered completely. She became Madame Deficit in the popular imagination, the epitome of all that was wrong with the Ancien regime. The monarchy, too, was severely weakened. Louis XVI's decision to bring the matter to a public trial, in a misguided attempt to clear his wife's name, backfired spectacularly. Instead of vindicating the Queen, it dragged the sacred institution of the monarchy into the muddy arena of public scandal and legal wrangling. It stripped away the aura of divine right and unquestionable authority that surrounded the king and queen, exposing them to the scrutiny and judgment of their own subjects. This public trial eroded the monarchy's prestige and legitimacy at a critical juncture, only 3 years before the French Revolution. It demonstrated a profound disconnect between the court and the common people, a lack of understanding of public sentiment, and a catastrophic misjudgment of how to manage a crisis. The story of Jeanne de la Motte, the orchestrator of this intricate fraud, takes a dramatic turn after her conviction. Despite her harsh sentence, she managed to escape from Salpêtrière prison in June 1787, disguised as a man, reportedly with the help of her husband. She fled to London, where she continued her relentless campaign against Marie Antoinette. In England, she published her sensational memoirs, Memoirs Justificatives, which further spun her fabricated narrative, portraying herself as a victim of the Queen's treachery and continuing to falsely implicate the Queen in the necklace affair and even in an illicit affair with Rohan. These memoirs were eagerly consumed by the British public, who enjoyed French royal scandal and were then smuggled back into France, further poisoning public opinion against the Queen. Jean's final days were as dramatic as her life. In 1791, while in London, she fell from a window and died, either in an attempt to escape creditors or from injuries sustained in the fall. Some speculate it was suicide, others murder, but her death remains shrouded in a final layer of mystery, a fitting end for such a manipulative figure. The repercussions of the diamond necklace affair reverberated far beyond the 1780s, playing a significant, albeit indirect, role in the outbreak of the French Revolution in 1789. While not the sole cause, it was a critical contributing factor that accelerated the monarchy's decline. Firstly, the scandal confirmed and intensified the public's perception of Marie Antoinette as an extravagant, selfish and immoral queen. The affair cemented her image as Madame Deficit, a symbol of the monarchy's fiscal irresponsibility at a time when the nation was drowning in debt. The popular narrative was that the Queen had indeed wanted the necklace, perhaps even acquired it secretly, and then betrayed Rohan. This profound loss of public trust and affection was fatal. A monarch's power, particularly in a system like the Ancien regime, relied heavily on public legitimacy and symbolic authority. Once that was eroded, the foundations of their rule began to crumble. Secondly, the trial itself exposed the deep-seated corruption and moral decay that many believed permeated the French aristocracy and the church. The spectacle of a prince of the church involved in such a sordid scam, and the court's subsequent handling of the case, fueled widespread popular resentment. It contributed to the growing belief that the ruling elite were decadent, self-serving, and out of touch with the suffering of the common people. The affair stripped away the veneer of sacredness and respect that had traditionally protected the monarchy, exposing it as fallible and indeed capable of being duped. Thirdly, the affair highlighted the monarchy's inability to control its own narrative or to effectively manage a crisis. Louis XVI's decision to pursue a public trial intended to vindicate his wife instead subjected the crown to public judgment. It demonstrated a profound miscalculation of public sentiment and the power of the nascent public sphere with its pamphlets and newspapers. The monarchy, by engaging in a public spectacle of this nature, inadvertently demystified itself and lowered its standing. Finally, the affair provided compelling propaganda for the revolutionary forces that were already gathering momentum. It became a powerful symbol of the monarchy's decadence and incompetence, fueling the flames of discontent and radicalizing public opinion. When the Bastille fell in 1789, it was not merely a reaction to economic hardship, it was also a culmination of years of eroding trust, fueled by scandals like the diamond necklace affair, which had systematically stripped the monarchy of its moral authority and its connection to the people it supposedly ruled. In retrospect, the diamond necklace affair stands as a remarkable case study in the power of perception, the fragility of reputation, and the destructive force of ambition unchecked by reason. It was not a single event, but a complex web of deceit, delusion, and desperate circumstances, involving a cast of characters who, in their own ways, contributed to the unfolding tragedy. Cardinal de Rohan, the ambitious but naive dupe, desired only to reclaim the Queen's favour, a testament to how deeply entrenched the system of patronage and royal approval was in the Ancien regime. His credulity, though bordering on the absurd, reflects a world where courtly whispers and secret royal dealings were commonplace. He was a victim of his own vanity and a desperate yearning for advancement. Jeanne de la Motte, the true architect of the fraud, was a master manipulator, a woman of formidable intelligence and ruthless determination. Born into relative poverty, but obsessed with regaining her noble heritage, she exploited the weaknesses of those around her with chilling precision. Her ability to weave an intricate web of lies, forge documents, and even stage a fake royal meeting speaks volumes about her audacious character and her desperate need for wealth and status. Her memoirs Justificatifs, written from exile, cemented her role as a key antagonist in the drama, ensuring that her version of events, however fabricated, would continue to damage the Queen. Marie Antoinette, the tragic figure at the heart of the storm, was entirely innocent of the fraud itself. her repeated refusals to buy the necklace underscore this, yet she became the ultimate victim of the affair's fallout. Her perceived extravagance, her Austrian background, and the court's detachment from the suffering of the common people made her the perfect scapegoat. The scandal, though fabricated by others, resonated deeply with the public's existing prejudices against her, ensuring that her reputation was irrevocably tarnished. She would carry the stigma of Madame Deficit and the image of a frivolous, out-of-touch monarch all the way to the guillotine. The jewelers, Boehmer and Basang, though themselves victims of the fraud, also played a role through their relentless pursuit of a sale. Their desperation to unload such an expensive piece of jewelry, even resorting to shadowy dealings through intermediaries, highlights the unique financial pressures faced by luxury artisans in a volatile market. The ultimate significance of the diamond necklace affair lies not in its monetary value, immense as it was, but in its symbolic weight. It was a scandal that exposed the deep fissures within French society, a monarchy perceived as detached and extravagant, an aristocracy consumed by ambition and moral decay, and a populace seething with resentment. It chipped away at the monarchy's foundations, eroding public trust and legitimacy, and providing revolutionary ideologues with powerful ammunition. It was a bizarre, almost theatrical, prelude to the greatest upheaval in French history. In the end, the glittering cascade of diamonds that once held the hopes and ambitions of jewelers, a cardinal and a manipulative noblewoman, served not as a symbol of royal splendor, but as a fuse that, once lit, would contribute to the explosion that swept away not just a queen's reputation, but an entire ancient regime, marking the dramatic transition from the gilded age of absolute monarchs to the terrifying dawn of revolution. The lost colony of Roanoke speaks of a vanishing act into the wilderness. The diamond necklace affair, conversely, speaks of a vanishing act of a different kind, the slow, agonizing disappearance of a kingdom's soul, consumed by its own internal decay and the blinding glitter of a diamond-studded lie. History at its core is an unending tapestry woven from threads of destiny, ambition, and intrigue, some brilliantly illuminated, others shrouded forever in mists of mystery. We've journeyed through the oceanic expanses of time, tossed by the same relentless Atlantic waves that carried John White on his desperate, fruitless quest, sifting through the silent sands of Roanoke, trying to catch the ghostly whispers of a vanished colony. Their tale, a blurred chapter in the annals of exploration, underscores the profound fragility of human hope in the face of untamed wilderness and unforeseen complications. The disappearance of over 100 souls without a clear trace, leaving behind only the enigmatic carving of a single word, cemented the unsettling truth that even amidst the fervor of discovery and the clash for power, there are fissures where truth can vanish entirely, leaving imagination and endless speculation to run wild. Then, we plunged into the gilded cages of Versailles, where the air, thick with perfume and powdered wigs, crackled with the electric tension of social unrest. There, a different kind of disappearance occurred, that of truth, reputation, and the very fabric of royal authority, all consumed by a scandal born not of the vast unknown, but of avarice, delusion, and a single breathtaking piece of jewelry. The diamond necklace affair, a bizarre prelude to revolution, laid bare the fragility of perception and the devastating power of human folly, demonstrating that the intricate dance of deception could be just as destructive as any hurricane or hostile tribe. It was a story of human drama, played out on a stage of opulence, culminating in the slow, agonizing disappearance of a kingdom's soul. But history's narrative is not solely dictated by the intricate machinations of humanity. Sometimes the earth itself rises, not to swallow a small colony or to bear witness to a queen's undoing, but to unleash a raw, primeval force that dwarfs all human ambition and folly. From the courtly intrigues of Paris, where the fate of a monarchy hung by a diamond-studded thread, our journey now takes an abrupt and dramatic turn. We leave behind the powdered wigs and silk gowns, the whispers of scandal and the rustle of forged letters, to travel eastward, across continents and oceans, to a realm where the very ground beneath our feet is alive, breathing fire and brimstone. We shift our focus from the subtle, insidious dangers of human deceit to the overwhelming, undeniable power of nature untamed. Here, in the tropical paradise of the Dutch East Indies, specifically in the tranquil Sunda Strait, an ancient brooding giant was stirring. This was no gradual erosion of power or a slow unraveling of reputation. This was a cataclysm, a deafening roar that would echo across the globe, painting sunsets crimson and sending shockwaves through the very atmosphere. We are about to witness the 1883 eruption of Krakatoa, a monumental event that would redefine the limits of human experience and leave an indelible scar on the planet, a testament to the Earth's terrifying, magnificent power. In the vast and intricate tapestry of Earth's geological history, certain moments stand out as profound reminders of our planet's immense, often terrifying, power. Among these, the 1883 eruption of Krakatoa ranks as one of the most cataclysmic and far-reaching natural disasters ever witnessed by humankind. This was not a gradual, unfolding crisis, but a sudden, violent paroxysm of the Earth that obliterated islands, generated colossal tsunamis, darkened skies across continents, and sent shockwaves rippling around the globe for days. It was an event that indelibly etched itself into the collective memory, forever altering landscapes, weather patterns, and even the way humanity perceived its place in the natural world. To fully grasp the magnitude of Krakatoa's fury, we must first set the stage. The volcano itself was part of the notoriously volatile Pacific Ring of Fire, a horseshoe-shaped zone that is home to over 75% of the world's volcanoes and 90% of its earthquakes. Located in the Sunda Strait, the narrow maritime passageway separating the islands of Java and Sumatra in what was then the Dutch East Indies, modern-day Indonesia, Krakatoa was a complex stratovolcano. Prior to 1883, it consisted of three main peaks: Rakata, the southernmost and highest, Lang to the north, and Perbawatan, the northernmost and lowest. These peaks formed a volcanic island with a caldera submerged beneath the sea. For centuries, Krakatoa had been relatively quiet, its lush, tropical slopes providing a verdant, if somewhat ominous, backdrop to the busy shipping lanes that traversed the strait. Ships regularly passed through, carrying goods and people, oblivious to the immense power slumbering beneath the seemingly tranquil surface. The prelude to the main eruption was a series of increasing seismic activities and minor eruptions that began months earlier, serving as ominous harbingers of the impending catastrophe. Starting in May 1883, the volcano began to stir. Local residents and passing ships reported plumes of steam and ash rising from Perbawatan, one of Krakatoa's smaller cones. These initial eruptions were relatively minor, mostly phoretic, meaning they were caused by superheated steam from groundwater interacting with magma, rather than direct magma expulsion. They produced large columns of smoke and ash, along with rumbling noises that startled, but did not yet terrify, the local population. As the weeks passed into June and July, the activity intensified. More frequent explosions were heard, and larger ash clouds reached higher altitudes. Sailors in the Sunda Strait began to notice unusual phenomena: floating pumice stone, a sign of ongoing underwater eruptions, and unsettling disturbances in the ocean currents. Seismographs in Batavia, modern-day Jakarta, the capital of the Dutch East Indies, recorded increasingly frequent and powerful tremors. Geologists and volcanologists in the colonial administration took note, but the full scale of what was brewing remained beyond their comprehension. There was no precedent in their living memory for the cataclysm that was about to unfold. Life in the thriving port cities of Batavia and Singapore, and among the tranquil villages dotting Java and Sumatra, continued with its rhythms, unaware of the geological time bomb ticking just offshore. By mid-August, the rumbling from Krakatoa had become a constant, low growl, audible even in distant Batavia. The ash plumes were a perpetual fixture in the sky, sometimes illuminated at night by incandescent material glowing from the vents. The air quality deteriorated, and a sense of unease began to settle over the region. Ships navigating the Sunda Strait reported a disturbing increase in the amount of floating pumice, which sometimes formed thick rafts, making navigation difficult. The water itself, normally a vibrant blue, had become murky and agitated. The climax arrived with terrifying speed and apocalyptic force. The main phase of the eruption began on August 26, 1883, a Sunday. Around 1 p.m. local time, the volcano entered its paroxysmal stage. A series of increasingly violent explosions rocked the island, tearing apart the volcano's cones. Ash clouds, charged with electricity, created spectacular lightning displays, a terrifying spectacle of nature's raw power. The sounds of the explosions intensified throughout the afternoon and evening, growing from distant rumblings to thunderous roars that reverberated across hundreds of miles. The following day, Monday, August 27th, brought the most devastating and infamous phase of the eruption. This was the day Krakatoa truly exploded. At 5:30 a.m., a massive explosion occurred, sending a gigantic plume of ash and rock over 15 miles into the atmosphere. This was followed by 3 even more colossal eruptions in quick succession at 6:44 a.m., 10:02 a.m., and the absolute zenith of the event at 10:52 a.m. The 10:02 a.m. explosion was particularly violent, creating a powerful tsunami that ravaged the nearby coasts. But it was the 10:52 a.m. explosion that unleashed the full, unimaginable fury of Krakatoa. This final climactic detonation was so powerful that it generated the loudest sound ever historically reported. The sound wave from this explosion traveled around the globe, audible at distances of up to 3,000 miles, nearly 5,000 kilometers away. Residents of Perth, Western Australia, over 1,900 miles away, reported hearing a sound like distant heavy gunfire. In Rodriguez Island, nearly 3,000 miles to the west, people reported hearing the roar of heavy cannon. The atmospheric shockwave generated by this blast propagated outward, circling the Earth multiple times over the next few days, registering on barographs, atmospheric pressure recorders worldwide. The force of this explosion was truly staggering. It was estimated to be equivalent to about 200 megatons of TNT, or roughly 13,000 times the power of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The sheer energy released tore apart the island of Krakatoa itself. The northern 2/3 of the island, including the cones of Pebblewatan and Lang, simply vanished, pulverized and engulfed by the ocean. All that remained was a remnant of Rakata, a steep cliff face, revealing the volcano's interior. The caldera collapsed entirely, forming a submerged basin over 250 meters deep. The immediate and most devastating consequence of the 1883 eruption was the generation of colossal tsunamis. The collapse of the caldera at 10:02 a.m. and again at 10:52 a.m. displaced an enormous volume of seawater, creating waves of unprecedented height and destructive power. The first major tsunami, triggered by the 10:02 a.m. blast, reached heights of over 120 feet, 37 meters, along the nearby coastlines of Java and Sumatra. It struck the densely populated towns and villages lining the Sunda Strait with unimaginable force, wiping them off the map. Coastal communities like Merak and Jerenya and Teluk Betung were utterly obliterated. Ships at anchor were torn from their moorings and flung miles inland. Buildings were reduced to rubble, and the lush tropical vegetation was stripped bare, leaving behind a desolate landscape of mud, debris, and human tragedy. The later, even larger tsunamis, particularly after the 10:52 a.m. explosion and caldera collapse, caused further widespread destruction. These waves propagated outwards across the Indian Ocean, reaching distant shores with diminished but still noticeable force. Tidal gauges as far away as the Arabian Peninsula, South Africa, and even the Pacific coast of North America registered the passage of Krakatoa's waves hours after the main eruption. The human cost was horrific. The tsunamis were responsible for the vast majority of the casualties. Official records from the Dutch East Indies government put the confirmed death toll at 36,417 people. However, many estimates suggest the actual number was much higher, perhaps closer to 40,000 or even more, as countless victims in remote villages and those lost at sea were never accounted for. Entire communities, thousands of families, simply ceased to exist. Bodies were washed miles inland or carried out to sea, never to be seen again. The scale of human suffering was almost incomprehensible, a stark testament to the vulnerability of human settlements in the face of such overwhelming natural forces. Beyond the immediate coastal devastation, the eruption had widespread and profound atmospheric effects. The enormous volume of ash, dust, and volcanic gases ejected into the stratosphere created a phenomenon known as a volcanic winter. The ash plume itself reached an estimated height of 20 to 25 miles, 30 to 40 kilometers, into the mesosphere. This finely pulverized material, consisting of silicate glass and rock fragments, was then carried by high-altitude winds, circulating around the globe. For months, and in some cases years, after the eruption, the Earth's atmosphere was laden with fine volcanic particles. This stratospheric aerosol veil had several dramatic effects. 1. Global dimming and temperature drop. The vast quantities of sulfate aerosols, primarily sulfuric acid droplets, formed from sulfur dioxide emissions, acted as a global sunshade. They scattered and absorbed incoming solar radiation, leading to a noticeable reduction in global temperatures. The year 1884, the first full year after the eruption, was recorded as one of the coldest on record globally, with average temperatures dropping by up to 1.2 degrees Celsius, 2.2 degrees Fahrenheit. This climatic anomaly affected agricultural yields in various parts of the world, contributing to local food shortages and economic disruptions. 2. Spectacular sunsets and sky glows. One of the most visually striking and widely reported phenomena was the dramatic alteration of sunsets and sunrises. For several years after the eruption, the fine volcanic dust in the upper atmosphere scattered sunlight in unusual ways, producing intensely vibrant, prolonged, and often eerie red, orange, and purple hues at dawn and dusk. These Krakatoa sunsets were observed and recorded by artists and diarists around the world. Famously, some art historians suggest that the dramatic fiery skies depicted in Edvard Munch's iconic painting The Scream may have been inspired by these post-Krakatoa sunsets, which Munch would have witnessed in Norway. The vivid, almost surreal colours were unlike anything seen before, leaving a lasting impression on those who witnessed them. 3. Blue and green suns and moons. In some instances, depending on the density and composition of the aerosol layer, the sun and moon appear to be blue or green. This rare optical phenomenon, known as the Bishop's Ring, is caused by the selective scattering of different wavelengths of light by the volcanic aerosols. This ethereal sight, while beautiful, served as a constant reminder of the unseen forces at play in the atmosphere. The scientific and historical impact of the Krakatoa eruption was immense, transforming our understanding of planetary processes. It provided an unprecedented opportunity for scientists across various disciplines to study a major volcanic event and its far-reaching consequences in real time. The era of modern scientific inquiry was still relatively young, and the global scale of Krakatoa's impact forced a new level of interconnected observation and data collection. Meteorologists were particularly fascinated. They painstakingly tracked the atmospheric shockwaves that circled the globe, using newly installed barographs to measure pressure fluctuations. This provided invaluable empirical data on atmospheric pressure and wave propagation, fundamentally advancing the nascent field of atmospheric dynamics. They also meticulously recorded the global temperature changes and the unusual optical phenomena, leading to a greater understanding of the complex interactions between volcanic activity and climate systems. This was a pioneering moment in climate science, demonstrating how an isolated geological event could have worldwide climatic repercussions. Geologists and volcanologists gained profound insights. They conducted extensive surveys of the before and after topography of Krakatoa, using early bathymetric mapping techniques to chart the collapsed caldera. The event underscored the devastating power of caldera collapses and provided critical insights into the mechanisms of ultraplinian eruptions, a type of violent explosive eruption. The subsequent emergence of Anak Krakatau, the Orchield of Krakatoa, from the submerged caldera in 1927, offered a unique, ongoing opportunity to observe the birth and growth of a new volcanic island. This process, spanning decades, continues to provide vital data for understanding volcanic island formation and evolution. Seismologists, despite instrumental seismology being in its infancy, gained valuable data from the seismic waves that traveled through the Earth's crust and mantle. The eruption contributed significantly to the development and expansion of early global seismic networks, as scientists realized the necessity of coordinated international monitoring. Beyond the purely scientific, the Krakatoa eruption had significant socio-cultural impacts, shaping perceptions of nature and humanity's place within it. It reinforced a deep-seated sense of human vulnerability in the face of nature's overwhelming might. Newspapers around the world carried sensationalized accounts, often exaggerated but undeniably captivating, bringing stories of distant catastrophe directly into homes across continents. The event became a benchmark against which all future large-scale natural disasters would be measured, a universal reference point for unimaginable destruction. For the colonial Dutch authorities, it was a colossal challenge in terms of disaster relief, public health, and long-term administration, forcing them to confront the immense, uncontrollable power of the land they sought to govern and exploit. The Dutch government launched an extensive investigation and report, seeking to understand and record every aspect of the disaster, acknowledging its unprecedented scale. Beyond the immediate devastation and atmospheric effects, Krakatoa's impact was felt in subtle, yet significant, ways across various domains, illustrating the ripple effect of such a monumental natural event. Global communication and connectivity. The disruption of communication lines was one of the immediate practical challenges. Submarine telegraph cables in the region were damaged, and shipping routes in the Sunda Strait were severely affected for weeks due to floating pumice, submerged debris, and altered sea conditions. Yet, paradoxically, the eruption also demonstrated a new level of global connectivity. The sheer scale of the sound and atmospheric waves, detected worldwide, served as an unintended, raw form of global communication, demonstrating the instantaneous physical interconnectedness of the planet's atmosphere and lithosphere. Scientists in distant observatories, often thousands of miles away, could precisely measure the atmospheric pressure changes, a testament to the Earth's unified system. Local and regional ecosystems. The biodiversity of Krakatoa and the immediate surrounding islands was severely impacted. The pyroclastic flows and tsunamis essentially sterilized the island, wiping out all existing plant and animal life. The lush tropical ecosystem was reduced to a barren volcanic wasteland. This, however, unwittingly created one of the most important long-term natural experiments in ecological history. Over the decades, scientists have meticulously observed the process of ecological succession, as life slowly but persistently returned to the barren volcanic soil. They documented how pioneer species, lichens, ferns, and then grasses, followed by larger plants, gradually recolonized the island, carried by wind, sea, and birds. This unique natural laboratory provided invaluable data for ecological studies, demonstrating the remarkable resilience of nature and the fundamental processes of ecosystem recovery and biodiversity regeneration. Economic disruptions and human displacement. While the global economic impact was limited, the regional effects on the Dutch East Indies were considerable. Major port towns like Anjer and Merak, vital for regional trade, were utterly destroyed, leading to significant disruption of shipping and commerce in the Sunda Strait. Extensive agricultural lands, particularly rice paddies and plantations on the coasts of Java and Sumatra, were buried under layers of ash and pumice, devastating local economies and leading to widespread food shortages. The immense loss of life also significantly impacted the labor force in affected areas, further hindering recovery efforts. Villages were depopulated, forcing widespread internal migration and displacement, creating immense social challenges for the colonial administration. Artistic and cultural inspiration. The visually stunning Krakatoa sunsets, observed for years across the globe, left an indelible mark on the artistic and cultural landscape. As previously noted, some art historians propose that the dramatic, fiery skies in Edvard Munch's iconic painting, The Scream, 1893, were directly inspired by these post-Krakatoa atmospheric phenomena, which Munch, living in Norway, would have vividly witnessed. More broadly, the eruption seeped into popular culture and literature, becoming a powerful symbol of apocalypse, overwhelming natural force, and the sublime terror of nature. Stories, poems, and journalistic accounts about the eruption appeared in various publications, reflecting humanity's attempt to comprehend and process such an extraordinary, almost unfathomable event. It ignited a renewed fascination with volcanoes and geological power, religious and philosophical interpretations. For many indigenous populations in the Dutch East Indies, who lived in close spiritual connection with their land, the eruption was interpreted through various religious or mystical lenses. Some saw it as divine wrath, others as a manifestation of powerful spirits, or a sign of profound cosmic disruption. Similarly, for people of faith across the globe, the immense scale of the event forced a confrontation with existing belief systems and the limits of human control and understanding. It sparked theological debates about natural evil and divine intervention, reminding humanity of its profound insignificance in the face of forces beyond its comprehension. Today, the legacy of the 1883 Krakatoa eruption continues to evolve, a living testament to Earth's ongoing geological processes. From the submerged caldera, a new volcanic island, Anak Krakatau, child of Krakatoa, began to emerge in 1927. This young volcano has been actively growing, a geological infant steadily building itself from the remnants of its monstrous parent. It frequently erupts, sometimes with explosive force, sometimes with effusive flows, providing a living laboratory for volcanologists to study volcanic growth and behavior in real time. Its active status has not been without its own dangers. In December 2018, a catastrophic eruption caused a significant flank collapse, triggering a deadly tsunami that killed hundreds in the Sunda Strait, a chilling and tragic reminder of its parent's devastating power and the ongoing geological volatility of the region. The incident underscored that the lessons from 1883 remain vitally relevant, particularly concerning tsunami generation from volcanic collapses. The 1883 Krakatoa eruption remains a pivotal event in the history of volcanology and disaster preparedness. It underscored the critical need for better understanding, monitoring, and early warning systems for volcanic hazards and tsunamis, driving significant advancements in these fields. It propelled the nascent field of global seismology and atmospheric science, forcing scientists to connect phenomena observed across vast distances and to appreciate the intricate interconnectedness of Earth's systems. The meticulous study of its global atmospheric effects provided foundational insights into the potential for large eruptions to influence global climate, laying groundwork for later climate science. More broadly, Krakatoa forced humanity to confront its own vulnerability. In an age of burgeoning industrial power and scientific confidence, the eruption was a humbling demonstration that for all our ingenuity, nature retains the ultimate, destructive power. It was a moment when Earth itself roared, a sound that reverberated across continents, not in the polite whispers of courtly scandal or the mournful silence of a lost colony, but in a deafening, terrifying crescendo that reminded humankind of its profound insignificance in the face of cosmic forces. The Diamond Necklace affair was a story of human folly that brought a kingdom to its knees. Krakatoa, however, was a force of nature that brought the very world to a standstill, leaving an indelible scar on the planet and in the collective memory of humankind, a truly unforgettable chapter in the grand, boring, yet utterly fascinating saga of history. The tales of Roanoke, the Diamond Necklace and Krakatoa, each in their own way, demonstrate that history, in its quiet moments and its roaring climaxes, is always a story of what endures and what vanishes, leaving only questions in its wake.